All right, so sitting here with JP Schell. Welcome.
Thank you.
JP stands for
John Paul.
John Paul, right?
Yes, not the biblical, or not the Pope, but and not the Beatles either. But it was my dad and my grandfather's name, like, put together.
It's a cool name.
Pretty
cool
boring,
name.
But yeah.
Just plain. It sounds cool. So JP Schell works.
JP Schell works. Yeah.
Nice. I don't really know much about you. We happen to be neighbors.
That's true.
I know you're from the U.S.
I am from California.
You've worked as a scientist in pharma.
Yep.
And you're an author.
I'm starting to be. I mean, that's what I'm working on right now. I think that's where, like, culmination of kind of my scientific perspective and also my, like, deep love of, like, kind of sci-fi horror, like a big Frank Herbert, big Stephen King fan, you know, and Michael Crichton, kind of just with the scientific aspect.
Yeah.
And maybe the writing is not as eloquent as all three, but the product is pretty crazy wild now, and it's very relevant, I think, to the future, because it's kind of like, well, these are the technologies that are emerging. This is what I see on the forefront of, like, of biotech in general.
Oh, man, there's so much to talk about
and
there.
AI also.
Yeah.
And it's kind of the culmination of where that could go if there isn't an oversight, essentially.
Yeah.
In the way we kind of ethically use these technologies in the next, 20, 30 years.
Right.
Otherwise, clones and stuff is like the least of your worries,
Yeah.
So
I agree. There's a lot going on in that area right now.
Yeah.
But to give people a background, like, what have you worked with in that area?
Pluripotent stem cells is kind of the biggest, like,
what's that?
pluripotent. So this is
Pluripotent.
so totipotency and pluripotency are these kind of physiological stages of cellular life, and it's the ability to turn into any other cell type.
Okay.
So when you have sperm meets egg, the first few divisions, you basically create this kind of cavity. And in that cavity, that would be like the embryo, the stereotypical blastocyst, so to speak. Mm-hmm. And inside that, you have a clump of cells. And those clump of cells hold what is called pluripotency. And pluripotency, it's a property, and it's a property to be able to become all of the different other organs that reside in the body. So they can basically give the body plan of the emerging, developing organism.
Right.
And so that's what I've been focusing my PhD on, like, for many years. I actually, like, stayed as a PhD for as long as I possibly could. They finally, I think after 7-8 years almost, they said, like, there's like a law change, like, you have to go, basically, you have to graduate. But I was doing this for that back in San Diego at the Scripps Research Institute in Jean Loring's lab. She's one of the real pioneers in this field of induced pluripotent stem cells. So this is the idea of you can take any skin cell or any type of cell from your body, hair cell. We were using pubes at one point, so it doesn't stop. You can use it uroepithelial slough off, which is like the cells that you can like basically get out of the urine as well. So you can take these, like, real just cells that are clearly adult cells, reprogram them now.
Oh, wow.
And using these 4 factors that now a guy named Shinya Yamanaka, he won the Nobel Prize a few years ago now, for the ability to turn basically a fibroblast or a skin cell into a stem cell. And from that stem cell, you can basically grow, brain cells, cardiac cells, beating cells, and so that's the focus, is the idea of taking something that's an adult cell type and regenerating something that would then be useful for regenerative medicine to basically treat patients with their own cells, because they would be from your own body. There would be complete immune match, and actually Jean Loring, she has a company now called Aspen Neuroscience that emerging out of San Diego, where they are actually doing that for Parkinson's patients. They're taking the skin cells, they grow those, they reprogram them using these 4 different factors. And I could explain that if you wanted, but the idea is that you push them back to this more primordial stage, and then they take those cells and differentiate them, meaning expose them to certain factors and whatnot that we've studied to basically push those cells directly into the cell type that you're missing in the substantia nigra of Parkinson's patients. So this is like it's like a direct way of replacing the cell type that's gone in Parkinson's patients. And now they've created a company out of it, and it's pushing to like clinical trials. I mean, this is one of the highest hopes for that this kind of like technology is really going to work. So that's the pluripotent stem cell side of stuff, and that's the induced pluripotent stem cell side. But meaning induced as in pushed to pluripotency. Right. But yeah, that idea, that physiology, that property of pluripotency is kind of the thing that I've been focusing on for so many years, because I thought it was the coolest thing ever. Yeah, because it's basically, cool. I mean, it's the fountain of youth, and it's also just the progenitor. And, and if you think about this in a way of like, what is passed down? I mean, so you're like 30 trillion cells or something. I mean, some insane amount of cells. But what's actually passed down, is like one semen and one egg, And so those are your gametes. And the ones that are basically the cells, I mean, and in a female, those are made actually while the woman is in gestation, the previous generation. Yeah. So like, I mean, that's really wild. But the idea is that those are really like the most sacred kind of cell type that you can ever be, because they need to maintain all this information. Everything has to be perfect in order for you to even exist. Like if you make any damages to this, if you make any alterations, it could be catastrophic. And that's actually probably why we are seeing so much higher rates of infertility and things like this, is just because we're exposing ourselves to a lot more environmental factors, and we absolutely have zero idea of like how it's actually influencing even our gametes, something that are very sensitive at very early stages. Right. But yeah, that's kind of what I've worked on before my PhD. I moved to Sweden about 9 years ago to work in the lab of Frederick Lanner. And the reason I came here directly is, I mean, obviously Karolinska was the home of the Nobel Prize, and despite the fact that this was during all the Macchiarini fiasco happened right after I got there, but and I actually didn't apply directly to his lab, but was like looking because everybody was like in awe of what is this guy doing? It must be amazing. Right. I mean, I don't know if you saw this recent documentary, but like holy shit!
I haven't, but I've heard the stories about it.
Wow. Yeah. But anyway, that's like a whole nother can of worms.
Lying turns out to be pretty impressive.
Yeah. But also like not checking, and so that's the thing is like my but also I understand the wool was over their eyes. They were seeing this person from like a perspective of social media and like just the not social media, like the actual media saying like this person is amazing. They're the personal doc, et cetera, et cetera. And one of, like even my mentor at the time, he was on the committee and he had to step down. And I even asked him like during our yearly meeting, I was like, what happened there? And he's like, dude, I saw it, I believed it. I believed what I read and believe what I saw.
Of course, everyone has their own stuff going on. Not everyone can, be completely into it.
But so a shame for science for this one. But hopefully, this is, I don't know, there's just a blip in the radar. The other person that they hired actually that Karolinska hired at the exact same time was my former boss now. Kenneth Chen. And so he was like, so when Macchiarini took this massive fall from grace, they were like, well, who else was, hired under the same thing? And so Ken got a lot of heat. But then after it turned out that Ken was one of the founders of Moderna, and then that became the biggest thing to save the world. Essentially, now he was kind of the golden child of that situation. So they one of them was completely a hoax. The other one turned out to be like an excellent choice for the institution. So that was that. Yeah. So I stayed in Frederick Lanner's lab for about like 7-8 years. He was the first scientist in the world to inject healthy human embryos with gene editing CRISPR-Cas9.
Oh, goodness.
And so and they took the title for this, and we're also technically, I think, the first ones in the world, although we hadn't published the data ever, but we got the ethics and did the experiments to put human pluripotent stem cells, these ones that you can either isolate from the embryo, but these ones that can turn into anything. back into human embryos. And there's a lot of reason why we want to do that, just for the validation, for basic research purposes, not to make, you know, chimeric mutants. But that's also where that's where it comes down to, well, what is this science actually capable of? And there is, I mean, like, if in a really wicked situation, you know, it could be not as in Wicked Good, but like it's like wicked, you know, Witch of the West status. Is it's something that is, you know, it is possible. And in other less, like, you know, concerned, you know, countries and whatnot, or laboratories that are not ethical, you know, this is like is something that actually might already be being explored.
Of course. Yeah, while you were talking, I went from, wow, it's amazing what we can do, like it's so cool, to oh no.
Exactly.
No. Where is this heading? It's a very impressive resume. You've worked with a lot of cool stuff, and a lot of people probably don't know much about this world. So if I understand that the pluripotent cells, it's different from stem cells. Like classic stem cells you would have to get from certain parts of the human body, but this you can get from any cell. So
adult stem cells are basically what you've seen in like therapies currently, and they work really well. Adult stem cells, specifically a hematopoietic stem cell. This is an idea where if you know, for bone marrow replacement, if somebody has some type of blood disease or some type of immune disease, the body can be completely irradiated, and you can inject basically bone marrow from another individual, hopefully, you know, haplo match or immune matched to this person. And in that milieu, in that mix of just you know, weird tissues that's in there, we know that the hematopoietic stem cell exists in there, and with a high enough population that it can re-engraft into the bone marrow and basically start producing the whole blood system and the immune system for this person. And that's how a lot of cancers have been cured, actually, at this point. Is like, it's amazing. Unfortunately, when you irradiate the person, and because this is not a foolproof, you know, we don't know exactly what percentage, you know, it's a black box essentially of what you're injecting into the person. Maybe you can do some sorting to try to isolate the very specific ones, but it's like you're throwing Hail Marys here, and it's 50-50. So like you die 50% of the time. And so that's, so like at least that's the figure. That's the figure that I think like half the time it doesn't work, and meaning they don't engraft. And whether or not you have like the opportunity to get like another, you know, engraft it like as soon as possible.
I think I misunderstood. So with the old version, people die half the time with the stem cells. Yeah.
Well, I mean, and that's the thing is like, or half the time it doesn't work. A lot of times
because the body rejects.
Yeah, it just or the number of cells that were the right ones. These hematopoietic stem cells are not the one, or there's just you know, or they're not happy in that situation. They go into the body and they probably like die, you know, and
or their immune system takes care of them.
Yeah, or the immune system attacks these cells. It's not, and so that's so we have. You know, we have therapies. I mean, and they're good therapies, and they have. I mean, these people are otherwise going to die for sure. You know, so this gives them like big chance. And if it works, and they're healed for life. You know, and that's kind of, I mean, that's amazing. But the fact that we don't really understand the mechanism behind, I mean, other than like, oh yeah, it's got the right cell in there. And so that's the idea, is with pluripotent stem cells, now you're starting, like we imagine cells as kind of like a hill, like going down I mean, this is like an analogy that's used all the time, like kind of going down a hill that has many valleys, like a skiing down, essentially. So you start at this very high point, and how you get treated or what you encounter and your environmental factors. And environmental factor, you know, there's a lot of properties that the cell has. It has its metabolism. It has all these proteins on its surface of it that it creates an identity of that cell. And that's the thing, is like I talk about, and maybe I talk too loosely about cells of like, oh, this is, you know, and I take it for granted. But the way to think of a cell is much more as like an individual organism a lot of the times. And that's why like, you know, our science now is getting really into the single cell omics, meaning we're trying to isolate single cells now and identify exactly what is that single cell saying. You know, so there's the basic dogma of like DNA to RNA to protein. If you're not familiar with this is basically kind of the cell has a nucleus. The eukaryotic cell, meaning the mammalians and everything animal, has a nucleus, meaning kind of a encapsulation inside of the sphere cell part in the first place. And in there you have DNA. And the DNA is basically the blueprint for everything. But what may not be understood is that the DNA condenses and basically unravels in order to basically get it's called transcribed, but it's essentially making copies of different pieces that will then be our actual code for active proteins.
Right.
And so the protein itself is the functional thing in the cell. Everything is protein. That's why when people are like, oh, you don't get enough protein, it's like, I'm vegan, so yeah. So, so they're like, yeah, but I'm like, everything is protein. This is ridiculous. You can't just say like literally every aspect of cells is almost every aspect is made of different proteins.
Right.
It depends on whether or not some of them have higher concentration of certain proteins, but like everything in the cell is proteins. And so in order to make your environment, make the cell that you are, you have to read certain parts of it. And based off of how you read those parts, you have certain parts that are condensed. It's basically like zip files, like they're zip files. And if you're this kind of cell, maybe you're getting sensory from, and it's all based off of your context, where you are in the environment. You're sensing this guy from this side. You're sensing this guy from this side. He has a certain pattern on him of proteins. And then there's another pattern on the other side. And you're getting hit with this gradient of some other fluid that has, this other protein in it. And based off of that, all of those environmental cues are very much influencing how the DNA is opening and closing in different parts. And so basically it's like, it has an identity. And a lot of times when you see something like cancer emerge, it's when they have an identity crisis, essentially, where they start getting cues that are not necessarily the cue that is appropriate for maintaining the cell type that they actually are. And they end up then starting to influence the other environment around them in a negative way. And this is kind of also the root of aging, is just we have these redundant systems to kind of like keep the DNA from mutating, but the physiology that we are as an organism, like there are some organisms that really can basically live forever. Like there's lobsters and there's some jellyfish that go back into like a polyp stage. And you have to ask yourself also like, why is our DNA mutating to a point where it's like unsalvageable, you know? And it's like, it makes a lot of sense, but it's because we don't by the time we procreate, we've had enough time, like we can survive till our 30s pretty well without decomposing, It's like after the 30s, then it seems to kind of taper off a little bit more, but...
Can we get there?
I think so.
To lobster status?
I think so. I mean, I think that's... So there's a guy at Harvard or MIT, one of these places, but it's his name is David Sinclair. He's working on those same 4 factors that I talked about earlier, the OSK, or I didn't actually say it, but they're OCT4, SOX2, KLF4, and CMYC. And these are... The last one is actually a proto-oncogene, so like disregard that one. But with the 3 initial factors, and what I say by these 3 initial factors, these factors are in the genome, as well. But like the idea of forcing them to be expressed, and you're basically using these genes developmentally at this very early stage, the part of embryogenesis that I was talking about earlier, during the blastocyst, to maintain this thing called pluripotency. You use those factors. But if those factors are in the protein form in an adult cell, that's what pushes it back to this pluripotent stage, this primordial stage. Well, what did this guy David Sinclair is doing is he created a mouse. I think this is done in mouse. I think they've done it in rabbits also. But he created these lines of animals that genetically have this OSKM put in every cell so that he can turn it on basically with a chemical. And so like that's fine, and if you turn it on all the time, it just makes horrible teratoma, meaning like horrible cancer things throughout the entire body, like obscene, terrible. But if you just pulse it like turn it on and then turn it off real fast, like you can basically cure blindness. I mean, they're doing all these things. Like they got these animals to like see again. They've like, I mean, there's other ones that are like super old and they look like they're completely like brand new. I mean, they're like very healthy youngster, you know, like young muscle, you know, and it's because you're hitting the genome with these factors that then open the parts that are specifically for regeneration, for, you know, developmental processes. And as long as you play with that circuitry just a little bit and not too much, like if you do it too much, you're just going to cause cancer. I mean, you're going to actually develop another embryo essentially in the cavity of this animal, you know, and so that you don't want that. But you do want to basically reset. I think under his findings, it's resetting this epigenetic control. And the epigenetics is this, where is it condensed on the DNA? Where is it open? And so like which files are zipped, which files are open, you know, if you want to go into like a kind of analog idea of how gene expression works. But gene expression is basically having DNA, having the cell basically create mRNA out of that DNA, which is a template form of the specific portion that it wants to make that gene.
A little piece of code.
A little piece of code, and then that gene is made into a specific protein.
Right.
And that's what also gives us a completely like open end of now with the mRNA technology taking off. So that's what my last position at Smart Cell Solution AB, they you know, the idea of behind that is that now that the mRNA vaccine is out and it's been administered to, you know, billions of times now, like the idea that an mRNA therapy is also on the horizon. And what I mean by mRNA therapy is they would just inject you with mRNA. It would make the protein in your own body by your own cells, making it a lot more specific and a lot more, kind of, I don't know, perfect for you. You know, there's a lot of like, we make a lot of the stuff in vats with E. coli and stuff like that. And it's like, okay, well, did the protein fold properly? And then they have to do an enormous amount of work in finding out, okay, yeah, this folded properly. Okay, it still has the same properties as the one that would have been made endogenously in the body. But yeah, so mRNA is kind of the next thing on the horizon as a big therapeutic, and that's the big question. Can you make an mRNAs for, you know, these gene editing proteins as well? So stuff that would never be in the human body now can be made by the human body. And like that's kind of a weird concept.
That sounds scary.
Yeah.
I mean, like many people over the past few years, I've had to learn about mRNA.
Fair enough.
Obviously,
Yeah,
and I'm a very curious person, so I've tried to read everything about the vaccine and how it works, and it's interesting. Some people would say it's not really a vaccine because a classical vaccine is a pathogen, inactivated pathogen that you inject, and your body's immune system reacts to it and learns how to deal with that pathogen. Whereas the mRNA, like you said, it goes into your cell and makes your own body, in this case, produce the COVID spike protein, and then your body reacts to that.
Yeah.
Of course, a lot of people are worried about this. Like, what does that even mean? Like, since it's not a pathogen, it's just the spike protein.
Yeah.
The spike protein can obviously, or the virus can obviously evolve and maybe not have the same spike protein.
Yeah.
And then you have messenger RNA instructing your cells to create something. And where does all of that go?
Where does it go? That's a good question.
Is that? I mean, you didn't work on the vaccine, so
no,
this
I
is
didn't.
not a. Maybe you're not that into that world, but is that a worry with mRNA? Like how does it?
So the mRNA that we're using currently is modified RNA. So it's also, it's different than, instead of certain bases being a part of it, it has a completely one that you would not find in nature at all. And actually what that's intended to do is also elicit an immune response when it's injected, because you want a local response. You want the immune system to come there. It's actually, I mean, the ideology behind this is perfect. I feel like that. I mean, that makes sense. It makes a lot of sense that you would want to elicit this small, you know, localized reaction, and then you teach your immune system.
That's true for the classical vaccine as well.
The question is why doesn't it, you know, do that permanently? And is it, are we aiming for a section of the protein that's highly variable, so highly variable that like it's not acting as a vaccine, and in the sense that you would be vaccinated, and that's and yeah, I mean, my kid got the chickenpox vaccine years ago, and now like he was just hanging out with his friend who had chickenpox and he didn't get chickenpox, and it's like, oh, a vaccine works, it's like but so that's that's like that's a big question. If it mutates as fast as, say, like the flu, then you're just dealing with something else that is now another flu. It's another flu that, and it's going to keep changing. It's highly variable, and that's a bummer because especially if the CDC is correct in this. I think the last thing I heard about this was that it was something that was made in the lab. And, and so that's
that's not even a question anymore.
That's the most disheartening thing because this is now just, I mean, if you look at where the money is around this whole subject, it's like, wow. Okay.
that is the scariest aspect. Yeah. When you started talking about your book, that's what I thought of. I don't know if you read the latest report from this journalist named Emily Kopp.
No, I haven't. No.
It's on a publication called U.S. Right to Know, I think.
Yeah, okay.
They FOIA'd some documents, and basically these documents tell the whole story that the U.S. was involved in ordering the specific virus from the Wuhan lab.
Oh my God.
That ended up becoming...
That it
even... So it's pretty much the smoking gun that
that's...
They ordered specifically something that has a furin cleavage inside between S1 and S2, which the virus has, and that it connects to the ACE2 receptor. So they have documents proving that the U.S. people ordered the virus that then later leaked from the Wuhan lab. So
and that's the thing is like whether or not there was any like this is going to fall off the back of the truck, if there was any preemptive, despite whether or not there was, the amount of profit that was made during this. So I think, my old boss, I think he sold all his stock when like the company was worth $50 billion. So
probably a good move.
Or maybe even more than that. It was something ridiculous. But like, and I don't think that there's any malice or contempt in these people who originally like were coming up with it was just his lab that came up with the mRNA, with modified mRNA.
People probably work on these things for good reason. I think most people are generally good people who are trying to do good things, and they're doing research to help promote health. But
now it's going to be too easy.
But doing it by mutating viruses to infect human beings,
and then it's like, we're going to order that over here. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I'm rarely, I think I'm more conspiracy theorist these days now, just because I don't know, when you see through some of the stuff or you're close to any of these, I'm like,
I mean, if you went through these past 3 years and don't start thinking
then there might be something wrong.
You're probably... it's a wild world, man.
No, it's weird, and that's the thing is I was speaking to somebody else about this, and the Norwegian guy, and he was saying does this mean that we're gonna have more of these in the future? And it's like, well, if it's lucrative,
that's the thing.
And that's really unfortunate. I mean, I mean, how it was dealt with in the first place is insane, but I mean, for good and for bad. It's just it shows, we cannot unify, very easily, especially, based off of such, if you don't understand what is even infecting us enough that, how are you going to expect everybody to trust that this is going to,
that's
work?
Biggest concern,
the Johnson & Johnson, same company that's responsible for Oxycontin, now they did mRNA, so it's good. I don't know. It's just too much money. And honestly, that's one of the things that's I don't know, a little disheartening for science these days. I think going from basic research into you could have the cure for cancer, and really there are thousands of cures for really amazing science that should be pushed to the forefront of, of our society. This is what should be focused on. But all too often it's but our company already has, something that's working, or, we already have this and it's already making this much money,
Yeah.
and it's like, and we have money, it's just money is like, and I'm
That's the
saying,
thing.
and I
Incentive structures.
can't say that with like too much animosity. I mean, money is the only reason we even have biotech in the first place. So if
Yeah.
you didn't have these enormous amounts of money, like nothing would be happening. But now that stuff is happening, it's just like, maybe it's the people in charge or are scared to lose money, but it's like companies' jobs are basically to just grow. And like I think there's just been a long history. I've talked to my ex-boss about this, Ken. He was very like critical of a lot of the bigwigs at the pharmaceutical companies here in Sweden, especially, is because he said the reason they've gotten their titles have gotten up so high is they just reject everything. And when they reject everything, half the time you're right, or like 80% of the time you're right. And then they just get pushed up for making good decisions, of like rejecting everything. Yeah. But then by that time they're so far from the science, they're so far from the idea that like, hey, this could actually be beneficial. Right. But that's the thing, it's such a big investment. It's like millions and millions of dollars, and it's 10 years investment, on like like if you have something that's like, oh, this works, in the dish, and it works on animals, and we got a big paper out of it, on big biomedical paper. Okay, let's try to make a company out of this and push it into the clinic. It's going to be at least 10 years before that can actually go into somebody.
Why is it like that? I can't imagine it has always been like that. Yeah. Because we were developing, what do you call them? Antibiotics and stuff like that in the past. And it wasn't this massive behemoth of an industry, and stuff was still happening back then. Vaccines, antibiotics, a lot of good stuff was invented 100 years ago where it wasn't like this. What has happened that now it's the barriers to entry are so high?
I think too many snake oil salesmen, like there's just been like Macchiarini's, like now it's like, okay, yeah, well, that was clear. His mentality was kind of that. It's like, oh yeah, it's better than nothing, until he killed like people who were actually healthy without it. But like, but it was just a no-brainer, I mean, with his stuff. It's like if you had any medical or like stem cell committee looking at this data, they'd be like, this is shoddy, but no, I think I mean there's more harm to be done as well. I mean, now we can come up with like a zillion different small molecules that can do basically everything, and
so the stakes are higher.
The stakes are higher. I mean, and the stakes are probably higher lawsuit wise, like when it comes to compensation,
unless you're making vaccines.
Yeah, and that's the thing is like and that's something that you're immunity. That's why we're focusing there first. It's just this like, I'll move the target to where it's going to be safe, and where you can get through the red tape as fast as possible in order to push something. And that's why, so cellular-based like therapies, this is kind of the future. This is the idea of the future. But like I said earlier, a cell is like a little individual. It's like putting a little animal inside people, and it's like, yeah, you can have all these quality control checks. And now we have this thing called GMP, good manufacturing practice, and like, basically, I mean, the rules are so rigorous in order to get something through this. You have to have every chemical that you add, you have to like have somebody else behind you documenting that it was added at this exact time, this exact stage. But does that give you another product? Well, honestly, like, if the thing is just out of the dish, or out of the incubator for like a little bit too long, then it could be very different than this thing. So you have such a moving target as a product. And I think that's very difficult to market, and especially very difficult to get into like clinical trials, just because it's a lot more risky. It's a lot more risky. And a lot of the stuff that was initially done, I mean, there's just poor quality because they're trying to scale up. They try to scale up. I mean,
when you say a lot of stuff that was originally done, what do you mean?
So there was the first ever pluripotent stem cell like trial was done by a company called Geron, and they were using it for spinal cord regeneration. Okay. And the initial work was really, really quite amazing, where they would do it using it in. I mean, there was still some technical flaws. And actually, spinal cord regeneration is something that's really happening now at Karolinska. Like
that's so cool.
Yeah, but they take stem cells, they differentiate them into a certain type of neural stem cell, and then those cells actually can, remyelinate, they can reconnect. By now, just like there's several factors, and you can do there's quite a bit of research around this now, but you can get them to walk again, and now it's quite amazing, so stuff that's been also paralyzed for quite some time. But anyway, like the quality checks to get these done, at least this company Geron, they tried doing it just with bare stem cells. I don't think they differentiated them, but the idea was put in this like progenitor cell type, they'll figure out what what's going to happen, and they'll differentiate. And I think they must have had like really good results with their mouse model. But when they took that therapy to the clinic, the legal thing was that they could not inject any more cells into the human that they injected into the mouse.
Okay.
So you couldn't scale anything up in any sense. So you basically
they couldn't inject any more in a human than in a mouse.
Yeah, that was like
same amount.
Their request. Like I think it was like this much paperwork, and like in all of that, like what they were allowed to do was inject just the same amount of cells that they had injected into a mouse, because it didn't like give the mouse horrible cancer or anything like that with that number of cells apparently.
Yeah, but it's obviously going to be too little for a human being.
It didn't work at all, and they ran out of. I think either they ran out of money, but like everything just collapsed. It was and it was sad because it was like one of the biggest like.
It's promising
it's very promising, and. Now we've like, I feel like we're really starting to get to where the therapies actually are working in a lot of the animal models. Mm-hmm. And I think that, but translating that to like humans is going to be, it's always just very difficult. And you go too fast, you end up like in a Macchiarini situation. You go too slow, then it's just, the therapies never happen, or they happen somewhere else, and then people go on vacation somewhere to get their stem cell treatment, and whether or not it's legitimate or not, there's a lot of fake stuff out there, like a tremendous amount of fake stuff, and they've like, or you can order cells online basically, and even our lab was like checking, they'd order them just to see like what the hell are these people selling, and it's just like a bag of saline or something, and it has some like dead stuff in it, floating, but if you inject it, and that's so, but no, that's it's not good,
that's a good summary.
While I was working at Scripps Research, I actually got the honor of meeting with Rick Perry, who was at the time the governor of Texas, and maybe I told you this before, but like okay, yeah, but he was at the time he was the governor of Texas, and later he's a part of the Trump administration, and. He was a nice guy, honestly. Like very, like he was a politician.
Yeah,
like
most of them are very nice guys.
All smiles and everything. But from Texas, and we were very California. Like some of the people, I didn't even know who he was when they asked me like, oh yeah, we need like, I was teaching a class at on stem cell biology, and he came in asking like, well, what are these IPS cells, these induced pluripotent stem cells, the ones that you can take skin and make it into a stem cell, mainly because. He said, like, if I even mention the word embryo, like, I'll get lynched, he said, like, back in my hometown. And what had happened is, I guess he went for some type of, like, he was having some back issue or something, like, and he went down to Mexico to get some type of stem cell therapy. And I think he either came back with an infection or did absolutely nothing. And that's when it was like, okay, well, who's actually doing this kind of real, like, where is the real research going? And I think it actually it facilitated like a connection between like institutions, just because the politician came in. Maybe it was for more selfish reasons of like, hey, where is this science going? Like, I'm having some issues, but it didn't. I mean, it came across in a kind of a it's like a this other stuff exists, so like we just thought it worked, it turns out it's just false, so
but it led to more research than being
I think it did actually with a collaboration with University of Texas, so like it was one of these I think UIT, something like this, but it was a long time ago, and it was kind of a cool opportunity because it was just him and like his guard, and then like three of us, and we were like just we didn't really know like who he was and stuff. So we just spoke to him like a normal guy, and he's like, and he was a nice guy, you know, he was a nice guy and just very chill, but like, okay, like I can't, you know, you can't even say this back there. So like, tell me how you really do it, you know, like, are we really doing this now? And it's like, yeah, we are, you know. And I also got the opportunity to, take a skin sample of my grandmother. Actually, they were we had a, ethnic diversity project, because the thing is obviously, like, you know, genetics is not the same across the board, and somehow the behavior of the cells is also influenced by the genetic background. And so they were trying to make a stem cell bank, and so they had like a variety of different stem cells. And I'm Native American descendant, and so my grandmother actually volunteered to be their like native like cell line, and hers worked. And I actually had differentiated them into cardiomyocytes, which are these cell type that represents the beating cells in your heart. So she actually got to look through a microscope and see her own cells beating like a heart. I still have them on YouTube. The
cells also beat? You can see that?
Cardiomyocytes beat, and you can actually build them in like sheets now. And I mean, that's one of those are one of the cardiomyocytes are one of the major cell type that you're lost during like any type of cardiac problem. Like, so like you lose oxygen there, like these guys are the ones that die. You have infiltration of other like fibrotic tissue and whatnot. But if you re-inject like a progenitor cell, and that's actually what one of the sister companies here in Stockholm is actually doing, they're injecting a human ventricular progenitor, HVP, into the heart, and that actually can basically reintegrate and reestablish cardiac muscle. And that's one thing that's it's going to really help, because I mean, heart attacks are a big deal, you know, and your quality of life afterwards is compromised a lot of the time, just because, you know, if you don't get enough oxygen. And that's the thing with my grandmother, she actually had a hole in her heart. So for her to be able to see her own cells like beating in a dish, it was kind of like, yeah, this technology is not going to go for you. I mean, she's gone now, you know, but it's not going to work for you, but like you can clearly see, like, you know, it's going to change the world someday. That's so cool. So this was pretty awesome. So that kind of stuff. I mean, working at Scripps back in San Diego, also not to mention being like right next to one of the most beautiful beaches in the world, and I mean, that's also a big perk. Every lunch was like go jog on the beach, Black's Beach. Yeah, avoid the nudity. But
has this path always been clear to you? Have you always wanted to be a scientist?
That's a good question. I think so. I think it was always not like, maybe, I don't know. Yeah, that's a good question. I was thinking about that now of actually what I was mentioning earlier of, you know, it'd be nice if my kid could see me talk, you know. It's because I honestly don't really have like strong memory of my childhood almost at all. Oh, okay. Like, I don't think it was like blacked out because of like trauma or anything. Yeah. Like, it's just I think
too much of all this scientific stuff in there. It's pushed it all out.
A little ADD. I mean, or a lot of ADD, but like there's something just like it doesn't go that far back. I mean, I remember dressing up as like a military guy. You know, I was always
San Diego is a little bit of a military city.
I know, but I didn't grow up in San Diego actually. Okay. I moved there for the last 3-4 years before moving off to Scandinavia actually, and then
Where'd you grow up?
Northern California, so Sacramento area, the capital of California, but or a suburb outside there called Folsom or El Dorado Hills, but home of the gold rush. You know, that's where the gold rush started up there. But it was a good upbringing. You know, my parents. My father was an attorney or a lawyer. He went to the the Supreme Court before, you know, a couple times I think, and it was for some big cases and stuff. But he always fought for the good guys. He was on the government side. Debatable whether the good guys now, but like, and it's funny because he was actually like a Republican. Like, as long as I remember him, he was a Republican. And he said, yeah, when I was, you know, when I tell him all my leftist ideas, he'd be like, yeah, when I was your age, like I was left wing. I was left wing also. He's like, then it just like. Lose faith in humanity, I think. But
that's funny.
No, it's it was good upbringing. My mom also she's an antique dealer, so she has her own store in Old Town Sutter Street. Maybe it's going up for sale and she moves to Sweden soon, so we'll see now that my dad's passed. But it's a big question mark of what's going to happen there. But yeah, no brothers or sisters, only child. I have a half brother who turns out that I'm actually not related to completely at all now that I did 23andMe. Did I tell you this story? This was
you did not know.
Okay, this is the most whack thing. This is good to share on.
All right.
But yeah, so I did 23, and this is like where genetics gets crazy, you know. And it's funny because I am like I was a genetics major in my bachelor's, and why my parents never told me this, it's like, okay, well, debatable.
They should have figured out that you will figure it out.
Yeah, exactly. I'm thinking like, that's the obvious. When I'm showing you grandma's beating cells,
right?
Like, clearly you're gonna be like, he's getting close, you know, like. No, but yeah, I did 23andMe. I think it was like 4 or 5, and then maybe about 5 or 6 years ago now. It was here in Sweden though, with my ex-wife also. We're like, just checking we don't have any like shared, you know, DNA before we have a child. You know? Like,
right.
That was a good idea, you know, and so I get this that like, because it shows when you have relatives, you know. So 23andMe is like a genetic testing. You just do a saliva. I could be
swab.
like a poster child for them now, but like yeah, a little swab, send the saliva back, and they sequence your entire genome. And I guess they compare it with everybody else who's been sequenced and everybody through the history of, like, they have a really amazing database now. It's pretty impressive.
And then they sell that database to China.
They sold it to Merck, I think, actually. I think to Merck. Like,
Merck, yeah.
I think so. One of those big conglomerates. So yeah, they know what you're. At least I don't have to worry. I didn't have so many like bad stuff. So like, but yeah, it'll tell you all the predispositions, but it also tells you your relatives, like, and relatives you didn't know. And so I find this this half sister, like, it's like, you have a half sister in Wisconsin, and I was like,
oh wow,
I was like, okay, this is crazy. I was like, then like. So I call my parents first thing, like, okay, Dad, like, did you have some like business trip like back east, and like there's a whole nother family that we just like don't know about? And they're like, oh no. Oh, they're like, oh, maybe we should tell him. And I'm like, what do you mean tell me? Like, yeah, we should tell him. And he's like, my dad's like, oh, of course. You know, like, I don't even remember. You know, it's like, and he's like, yeah, it could be because you're the product of a sperm donor, because we had a sperm donor.
Oh.
And it was like, I'm like, okay, like, news to me. They're like, yeah, but you know, it was the 80s, and they said like, they mixed dad and donor, and who knows. And the thing is like, I'm super like my dad. Okay. I was super like my dad, like same build as him in the military, same height, same like personality, like the way we get up from chairs and stuff, like we make the same expressions and everything like this. And it was just like, you know, it was crazy, because I was like, oh, this is wild, you know, because he said like, and even my dad said like, oh, that's crazy, because like you and I are very, you know, very similar, you know. It's just but
so how does this happen then? What is this? So
the what we've pasted together so far, and I'm like, I feel like I'm getting actually closer to the donor himself. Like I think there's a nephew of his that I'm like friends with now that I can deduce, and I've actually asked the guy like, because he was like, oh yeah, I'll give you the family tree, you know, like, but this was like a year ago, and like maybe he actually told the guy, he's like, oh yeah, this guy's looking for you or something, and then he's like, don't give him any information. Like, I don't know, people, you know, on the internet, it's like, okay. And then I told him like, I don't need money or anything, I'm not coming for money, it would just be curiosity, you know. But no, apparently he was a MD PhD who moved to California at Berkeley, and he was a donor in Wisconsin. That's how my half sister was conceived, and then he moved to California and probably ran out of money and donated sperm there to get, you know. And
that's crazy. So it is his sperm.
Yeah. So I'm thinking it was more. It wasn't. At least it was like before. Like, I mean, this was not IVF or anything. So I'm thinking more like turkey baster kind of, like, so, like, probably, you know. It's just they're like, oh yeah, all right,
that's crazy.
Yeah. So and that was at like I think 35 or something. I found out that, and I was just like, "What?" You know,
what does that do to you? Like, how do you feel about that?
I think I would have processed it way differently if I was like a teenager.
Yeah,
I'd
obviously.
be like, "You're not my dad." I don't know. My dad was always super nice, so like I probably wouldn't have even rebelled against him.
Dad is someone who's there, and
exactly.
It's not just a biological piece.
That that actually also made me kind of change my opinion on like whether or not I would ever want to adopt. Like if there was any problems whatsoever, it's like adoption would be a better choice than putting somebody through like fertility like injections and stuff. So I mean it's pretty horrible, but I mean if the person that's coming out is, I mean now that like I have my own kid who's for sure, I mean I don't know, I got to do 23 in I'm pretty sure.
Half sister in Wisconsin.
No, but like I'm quite confident, obviously, like that I see expressions in him that are like, whoa, now this is getting like wild, that it's like just like a little clone of me. So that part's kind of a little bit different because I mean we had a lot of in common, but like now I'm seeing like with me and my own son, it's like, oh man, it's just like the same person sometimes.
Right.
So
that's so interesting.
Yeah.
Wow, what a crazy thing to learn at 35.
Yeah, it was a little weird, but I don't know. I feel like it's okay. You know, it's like, oh, I had a father. Like they wanted a kid so bad that they actually even like pay. They like some kids, nobody wants them. It's like they wanted me so bad that they actually made me. So. And now I feel like my mom jokes a little too much. She's like, "Oh yeah, we paid for you," and I'm like, "Come on, like not cool, like." Give it a breath.
Yeah, that's funny. Was your dad right about your being liberal in your youth, going Republican or
probably
more
not
right-wing?
Republican, but like definitely more conservative, I'd say. Like not conservative in any like social aspects. I think that's maybe a little bit too, but like, I don't know. I think no. He's had some influence, but I think his mentality. I mean, I've always like equated like being super right wing as like losing faith in humanity. Like I mean, but there is a lot of problems, and those problems start early, and then it's hard. It's very difficult to take them. I mean, I don't know, not to get into like immigration or any of these things, but like. Where you grow up, where your socioeconomic, like where, like it's, you need to invest in people, like no matter what it is or who it is. Mm-hmm. Like I definitely don't believe in this idea of like, equality at the top, just whatever. I think like equal opportunity is like the key to a better future, a more like relevantly like, okay, we're going to actually progress as a society. But, I don't know. I feel like my views are not really going very political in any respect now. I don't follow too much politics that much, especially American politics anymore. It's always just like, I mean, it's disgraceful mostly. Yeah. and it's just so confusing. And the people that are attracted to politics, I mean, not to watching it, just, I mean, people attracted to being in those positions, they tend to be very narcissistic, egotistical people, you know, and that's the worst people. Like that you want running your country. Like I honestly think that there should be rules about like complete transparency. How about like just the obvious, like no conflicts of interest. Like if you're voting on something that you own, like how about you don't have the right to vote?
The tricky part is that those who are affected by those rules would be the ones creating them. That's always the issue.
That's why I think for every representative of like your state, your county, your whatever, your city, you as a public servant should only make the average income of the people that you represent.
That's a great idea.
Because like why then you have an incentive to actually push everybody up, not just push yourself up. And that's I don't know,
question is just who's going to enforce that?
No, there's no. And it's just because it attracts the wrong people. I mean, if you had like I don't know, like just some saints, some people who just have no ego, who just literally want to see like things work better for the world, but often those people are like the quietest. I think they're just they're doing other stuff. And
I actually wanted to ask you about that because I follow American culture, American politics a little bit, but as an outsider. I'm born in former Yugoslavia, came to Sweden when I was 5, so I'm pretty much a Swede.
Fair enough.
And as many people from around here, I look at America and go, what the hell is going on over
what
there?
happened?
Like, it's madness.
There's like a lot of lead still in the water or something.
It's madness. But just like the entire political system is like a reality show.
It is. Yeah.
As an American who's lived in Sweden for 10 years, almost 10 years now.
Yeah.
How do you view what's going on over there?
So I would have to say that I think you're just kind of, you're used to it when you live in it. Mm-hmm. It's so I mean, up until Trump. I mean, Trump was like another level of like, oh, this has gotten ridiculous. You know, it was probably similar to other presidents.
Is that when you checked out?
No, I think it was before then. It was before then. But like, no, but I remember also coming, like, so I moved to Norway first, and I was having a conversation, and like, it was like, oh yeah, but you know, like, but what do you think about America being, you know, the military being in these other countries, you know? And they're like, don't you see anything wrong with that? You know, I was just like, I don't know. I was like, if they're there, they're probably there for a good reason, right? They're like, America the Great, you know? Like, I never just like, I think it's like, America has this thing, let's keep people under enough debt, under enough stress, under enough like other shit that you just cannot pay attention to what's happening. Like the sky is falling, but like nobody's even looking up, you know? It's just because they're stressed out, because it's hard to be political, you know, if you're barely making ends meet. And I think like majority of the people are living paycheck to paycheck, if that, you know, and having to rack up a lot of debt. And that just really like, it messes with your soul, you know, like when you feel like you owe something and you're basically kind of a slave to the system no matter what, you know, it really, then you know, you're not thinking about like, well, what is the military doing? And that's kind of, that was kind of my take on things. And she's like, but why are they there? You know, and we start talking about these things and I was just like, Jesus, like America's kind of like, I mean, like other places would call this terrorism, you know, like what are you doing there? Like, this is not your soil. Like, you're just there. And I was like, overlooking things, you know, but you bomb these people, you know, I don't know. There's, so, yeah.
How did your thoughts evolve on that question then?
I think they just kind of, I don't know. There's, they didn't really evolve too much. They're just kind of, I mean, now I'm more conscientious about, I see America in a very different light. I see it in a light of like a desperate place with no no parachute, you know, where people, it is, it's based off of, like, you tell every kid, you know, they're going to be amazing, you're going to rule the world, you know, and then you show them social media that's just like disgusting now. That's just like everything extreme. And then you give them zero opportunity to actually do that, you know, and it just creates so many problems in society, I think, you know. I don't know if you've heard this. There was like, it was probably just a meme, but it was like it was supposed to be a statistic of like what Americans want to do, or what Western society. They interviewed like a bunch of Chinese kids, and like this was, I think, based off of like TikTok influence. You've heard of this? Okay,
I know
so it was like, the Chinese kids, like they all aspire to be astronauts, you know, or most of now. That's the most popular. Scientists, and it's like influencer is like
in the US.
And it's like you have to do something to be like, shouldn't you do something good for the world to be an influencer? Like, why should you be an influencer? You know, and that's. I don't know. It's just abysmal to me of how things have shifted into the state of what we have now as how people are making money. You know, this whole like OnlyFans thing. I like, my buddy was joking about that like a year ago, and then now it's like, what the hell? Like, this is like everywhere. Like, it's just like
enormous.
Talking about podcasts, it's always, there's like, 3 of them are like OnlyFans, but I'm like, what is you know, what is this world that we're like coming into, that this is just like a more desirable job than any, like, you know. And that's, I don't know. Yeah, we're seeing some byproducts of decisions made earlier, but I don't know. That's it's it's a weird world.
It's a bit of a mess.
Yeah, it's a bit of a mess. And America, like, of course, I think America just does things extreme. You know, it's just like, let's do it to an extreme. You know, and just like food in America, you know, it's like, it's just crazy. But but it is what it is. And so I don't know. Like, I don't have, I'm thinking of taking more of like a George Carlin stance on things. It's like you just gotta laugh about it and like kind of watch the thing burn down. But like, but it's not. It's not a nice thing.
It's a shame. Though.
It is a shame. It is a shame.
What is the alternative? Like who would be taking over the leadership of the world?
Exactly.
I mean.
Well,
America,
I mean, at this point, I would rather have a computer program, basically, like an algorithm that's like allocate, like, this is where food is needed. Like, let's send it there. You know, it's like, okay. You know, like an easy, like, I don't get a paycheck. It's an algorithm that can basically, you know.
That might be what
I'm going to vote for Siri and Chat GDP and Siri need to have like a baby that's going to,
Siri, that would be interesting. Yeah.
No, I mean, maybe, you know, something. Or just like all of the politicians, just out. Just only, you know. I mean, but just it's impossible. You have all of these. You have these corporations. They have infinite money, you know, and they have infinite influence, and people are corruptible. That's the bad thing. It's like even if you're like, right now $1 billion to do this, like, okay, I guess $1 billion. You know, it's like
I think sooner or later it'll have to tip over, but how difficult that process gets is a big question because you know. That's what we do. The human history is a battle between centralized and decentralized power forever. It was, you know, the Catholic Church, or it was whatever the kings. And you know, sooner or later, people get enough, and they throw them off. And now it's the corporations that have, you know, exploded into such massive behemoths that they own governments. They can buy every single congressman and senator in the richest country in the world. Easily.
Yeah, and that's dangerous.
Clearly, that's too much centralized power. You know, sooner or later, it's going to have to tip over. But how and, you know, what the price tag is for that tipping over, that's going to be...
Do you think Amazon is dangerous?
Oh, yeah.
So actually, in my story, I actually have something called Prime as the name of a state because Amazon basically bought Nevada. But anyway, that's something really...
That makes a lot of sense. I always think about, like, Google. If Google, you know, the leadership there is, you know, doing nice things. They're helping people with a lot of great products and all that stuff. Just imagine someone crazy takes over Google. How much damage could be done in like one day?
I mean, even if they deleted all my email, I'd be pissed. You know?
Just that. My
Gmail's
gone. You mentioned briefly that you and your father were like the same size in the military. Were you? Did you serve in the military?
No. Just when he was in the military.
Oh, okay,
I mean, when I was a teenager or like an adult or just like a young adult, we were like the same size, same build, you know, like same weight and stuff. I was never in the military. I applied for Navy, and then I think it was because I was on like Adderall or like one of these medications for ADD. They didn't actually, and they said I had flat feet or something too. It was like two things, and they're like, and you're like college material, so like don't go. Like,
that's nice of them.
But I mean, I've been in college. I felt like I was in college forever. I did like even my bachelor's. I think I took like 6-7 years. Like it was a long bachelor. Like I just did a psychology major, then did a genetics major, and like I don't know. I enjoy just like learning.
You had a good time.
Had a good time, and it was a cool place. Yeah.
Nice.
Fun to learn stuff. But
probably a good move.
I think so. I mean, so from a lot of the friends who came back, yes, absolutely. I mean, they dealt with so much, and actually not even in now, like only now they're starting to be like really like kind of mellowed out, like from a lot of depression and stuff and substance abuse when they get back, you know, like
have you followed at all like the developments in psychedelics for veterans?
Actually I talked to this to one of the veterans about this, about psychedelic mushrooms or psilocybin mushrooms, and
seems very, very promising.
Actually apparently MDMA, I've never been a big strong proponent of MDMA ever. I actually wrote like a thing in college about like there was some studies that were originally published, and now they've been kind of pushed over now, or like turned out the MDMA was like mixed with amphetamine or something, and that's why you had negative effects.
It was a false study.
But and it's unfortunate because like for many years, like maybe it's okay. I mean, I had also a lot of friends who did way too much and like and you can definitely tell there's a difference. Oh yeah, you know, like
you can overdo anything.
I mean, this one's like this one's like quite. It's like, dude, it's a little slow. You're a little like like it's good, but but definitely, you know, like LSD and psilocybin, I think, are super important for the human condition, perhaps. I think that should, for everybody who's in politics, that's what should be like
that would be interesting.
That should be the credo. You have to take this before you can join, just so you're not such a dick. Like it's like maybe you can put things into perspective. I mean, because I think that's like, even if you don't feel like there's like a connection with a higher force or anything, there's definitely like a openness to empathize with other people more fluidly, and take somebody else's experiences like and feel it as not just, I mean, I think people are just so traumatized and whatnot, they're just sheltered off. You've created these brains, I mean, the idea of a brain is, you have all these infinite connections at first, and then it gets pruned down, into these solid connections. And psilocybin and LSD and psychedelics seem to kind of give you some rewiring potential. And I think that rewiring potential just allows you to see your life through a different perspective, even though you've been kind of put into this, like isolate, like your perception of yourself, your perception of others, and that's something very healthy, I think, for the humans. Yeah.
I'm definitely a proponent.
I'm a proponent. Yes.
There's an organization called Nätverk för psykedelisk vetenskap, the Network for Psychedelic Science here in Sweden. Yeah. And they've been doing a lot of great work. A lot of research is happening now in Sweden.
That would be something cool to work on.
Yeah. Especially in psilocybin. There's in Karolinska, there's studies. I think they worked on so far on depression and also what's it called, near end of life care. I can't remember the word, but end of life care. They've been doing a lot of studies in Sweden now on psychedelics, and I think the world is like yearning for a solution to all the mental health issues, all the trauma that people are dealing with.
Well, alcohol is bad.
Alcohol is horrible.
Despite the fact that I do enjoy a couple beers, right? Probably too regularly, but like it's just, I mean, it's so damaging for the brain.
Oh yeah.
Like it's just so damaging for societal I mean, it's just like, if like and that's where again, nicotine and alcohol are probably the two like most addictive things. And it's in your grocery store. Well, I mean, it's not, you got 3.5s over here, but like but those will do the job too, but it's like, and that's, I'm assuming the companies owning the lobbying and whatever.
For sure. No, that's so deeply ingrained in our societies, the alcohol and cigarettes.
I have heard that, is it Finland? Oh, now I don't remember exactly who it was. It's either Denmark or Finland was saying that they were going to go completely nicotine free by like 2025 or something like that. Okay, you got to fact
I don't
check
know. When it comes to these things, I'm not for like banning stuff. I think adults should be able to do what they want, but I'm against marketing. Like I don't know. There's this book called On Liberty, like the classic book on libertarianism or classic liberalism. What's his name? John Stuart Mill, and he talks about how to handle gambling in that book. And I think that's a great way to handle like pretty much all
any addictive substance,
all vices, all of these things that adults should be able to do, but we don't want them in society on a broad scale. Basically, it says adults should be allowed to gamble in their own homes. Police, whatever authorities shouldn't be able to go into people's homes and stop them from doing it. But they're not allowed to put up a sign saying casino or like gamble here. And it's like, that makes sense to me. Like, people should be allowed to do what they want in their homes, but not, get new customers in by marketing. I like that solution. That's why I also like Systembolaget, the monopoly on alcohol here in Sweden. It makes sense to me. Like, adults should be able to do this because we're never going to stop it, even if we,
that's true.
Try to make it
otherwise, it'll go underground and it'll become a whole nother network of.
But here in Sweden, you're not allowed to advertise alcohol. There are some like non-alcoholic alternatives.
Yeah, they're doing a tricky. The 0.0.
But it still looks like a beer. But basically, you're not allowed to advertise alcohol, and it's like, that makes sense.
That makes sense.
And then people who want to do it, they'll find ways to do it.
I was very proud of Australia of like putting. They have like almost every grocery store has like the candy right next to the like to the checkout. Well, they had one lane for people who have kids, so that it doesn't have any candy on that one, so you don't have the kid like. And I'm like, yeah, it's just like if it's out of sight, it's out of mind. You know, I mean, like humans are just. We're like that, you know, it's like, ooh, casino, you know, like, I mean, I think you're right. I mean, agreed in the sense that like, I mean, and definitely they could legalize a few things, you know, that would be a lot. I mean, didn't end the world for California yet, but, but
then California does it the other way around. Like they go crazy on the other end.
Oh, the advertisements now.
The advertisements for weed. It's like, do you sometimes struggle sleeping? Smoke weed. It's like, whoa, dude, everyone struggles sleeping right now. What is this? Like, you have backache, smoke weed. I'm like, come on, man, take it easy, California.
California knows.
But that's the American way, though.
No, that is. I mean, it is so disturbing. Like every time I go back home, like just watching. Like my mom also, like she leaves a lot of Fox. It's not Fox. It's like CNN or something. But like sometimes it's Fox too, and I'm like. It's just the commercials, you know, like, and then it's just news all the time, and the news is always so negative. I'm like, I just want to see like a puppy being born today or something. Like, so give me some good news. Like, there's just no good news, you know, like, and it's always like live in fear, you know, like CNN, man. I was like traveling on not New Year's this year, but like a couple years back, and they're like, we're on orange alert for your city, and it's just like. Your city, nobody cares about like who's gonna do anything terrorist for, you know, to this little tiny town, you know, like nobody cares, you know, like, and it's like, oh yeah, so people are staying in, people are watching their backs, you know, it's just like, dude, you're just trying to scare people.
It's propaganda, it's fear, and then they try to sell you medicines and commercial breaks. It's crazy.
Are you anxious because the world is falling apart around you? You know,
but they're losing ground. I just heard a crazy stat that CNN's like ratings are 500,000 during prime time. 500,000 people. That's nothing.
That's good
for CNN. I mean, can you imagine? In a country of like 300 and something million.
That's a lot. I mean, it ever used to be like. I mean, whatever is on TV, then the whole world would just like...
CNN used to be like the top shelf rated, stuff, but they're dead. I mean, they're falling apart.
Well, good, you know.
It's good because I mean, better alternatives will pop up because people are not gonna stop being interested in news. So someone who looks at this and goes, "Okay, we need to do this better," is probably gonna.
I always ask my dad. I was like, "Why do you watch this?" I was like, "It's so depressing," and he's like, "Oh, I like the weather." You know, I was like, just go to the Weather Channel. He's like, oh, I don't know we had a Weather Channel. You know?
It's rough. It's rough. TV over there is crazy.
No, it's getting crazy. Apparently, a lot of people also don't have access to like fast internet and stuff like that too. So you're only getting just the public television, or not public television, but probably like whatever.
That's the thing. Like,
and then it's like so you can really indoctrinate people when that's all the channels they have. You know,
so many things in the U.S. are like so far behind from where they should be. That's why I'm saying, like, I think the tipping point is coming. Yeah. People are not gonna.
No more checks. That's
people are not gonna, you know, take this for too long, and because it's still. Somewhat of a democracy. I'm hopeful.
Hope so.
Someone will come along who sees this and is like, all right, time to flip things over without violence.
Well, like, I think it's been an issue because people, like I say, have been desperately stressed out and overworked. Well, now I think like, you know, automation will eventually take out so many jobs and you'll have so many people living, you know, in real poverty basically that unless there will be some time. I mean, did you hear about what's happened in Seattle? Like not so long. I mean that's it.
What was it called?
I can't remember. That was
like a little autonomous zone.
Yeah, exactly. But everybody's militarized and I mean, I don't know if something like that can last, but the fact that something like that can even happen is like shit's starting to. I mean, and you walk in LA and like there's. I mean, it's like I was just in Kenya, and there was places that would scare me more in LA.
Skid Row. I mean,
Skid Row is horrible.
When you see those videos when people drive by for like you know miles and miles and miles of tents, it's sad. It's sad. I've been to San Francisco a bunch of times.
Yeah, San Francisco's also gotten pretty.
For every time you go there, it's like holy shit! Like this,
everything smells like urine.
Madness. Like, it's madness. It's sad. It's like really because. For all the shit you can give America, it represents something. It should be, you know, a beacon of freedom culturally, but the decay is just. I mean, you know, people are someone born in the U.S. in let's say 2000. Why would they, be proud of their country at this point?
Exactly. That's a good point.
Or what they're, believe that their country is a force for good, because there's so much evidence to the contrary.
Yeah.
And that's a sad thing, because you're going to have a generation of people who want to tear things down.
Exactly.
And
and that's
scary. Some
also.
of it needs to be torn down. Like some of the political stuff is maddening, and we need a change.
Yeah.
But that does not mean tear the U.S. down.
Yeah, true. No looting.
Exactly. And I think there's a lot of people who are already of that mindset. Like everything needs to be torn down.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that's scary.
And that's where I think they're a little short-sighted. It's like even these guys who are like stockpiling guns and stuff. It's like, if the U.S. military wants to come after you, your little militant group, cannot do anything against one of their drones. Like, it's just like, this is David and Goliath. Like, but Goliath is like 8,000 times bigger. It's
see how it went in Waco.
Yeah, this kind and stuff. There's no chance. And it's like, and they got infinite people. And infinite technology, and it's just no. I think. I don't know. Yeah, and that kind of thing is scary. I mean, that kind of thing is scary throughout the world. Who's invested in all of the weapons and is now protecting themselves? There's stuff like this going on in other places of the world right now as well. It's like quite scary.
We're in interesting times on that front, for sure.
Yeah, and also this whole business with Putin right now, my goodness, of like, because I'm getting a lot more, less from the media here, more from friends in the States right now being like, are you guys okay?
Oh yeah.
Are you guys preparing? I'm like, preparing for what? Like, they're like, oh yeah, the invasion. I'm like, what are you talking about? Like, it's like, oh yeah, no, like we saw the news, like, or are they just blowing it out of proportion? I'm like, there's one pamphlet apparently that was distributed that was like, like common sense, like get water in the house, like just in case, but like just because there was that, it's like acknowledging that it's like a possibility. And it's like, I'm sorry, I'm like, if you don't plan for a blackout, like you should just always plan for something,
Absolutely.
inevitable,
Absolutely.
Like
having some water and
it's not a bad idea
for a few days. It's a good idea. I mean, cyber attacks are happening all the time.
And that's
like someone took out our GPS system.
Oh really?
Just a few weeks ago.
Jesus.
That stuff is happening. I mean, why wouldn't it? Because the world is a messy place.
It is.
People, especially here in Sweden and in the West in general, we've lived such comfortable, rich lives for decades. That we believe nothing can happen. This is just the way it's going to be forever. And there's a lot of crazy stuff going on in the world.
Exactly.
Clearly.
No, it's wild.
So anything can happen. I mean, I think war in Sweden is still
far-fetched for me. Far away.
It would probably mean we're pretty much in World War III.
Yeah.
But that is not that far away either. Like World War III is, you can see it happening at this point, like with what's going on in the Middle East.
At least Finland's going to probably get attacked first, if anything. So like we'll have so there's some buffer there, unless they go all through the north. But it's like probably going to hit Finland. There's some also animosity there, I'm sure.
Oh, for sure. No, I'm hopeful. I'm optimistic. I think, like I said, the U.S. is the key player here, and. As long as it's still somewhat of a democracy, there's hope that someone comes along and is like, hey guys, maybe we should kind of not start World War III and focus on, not having hundreds of thousands of people die from fentanyl every year. And like people can't afford homes. Like can we deal with this stuff? Someone more charming than Trump.
Yeah, that's true.
having like make America great again message.
Yeah, exactly.
I think is probably going to happen sooner or later.
Yeah.
But we need it to happen sooner rather than later, because later,
now I think it's
see where we are.
It's like watching car crash in slow motion. It's like I think a lot of that's a lot of the key things have already, like a lot of the factors have already in motion, and it's just now we're seeing the byproduct of that. And the society that we've created. It's become a cesspool in some aspects of our political systems, and still these like archaic ways of trying to like push each other around, like, oh yeah, I'm just gonna push your boundary over. It's like the idea of more lines in the map Like, I don't like that idea.
No.
You know, I want a more international, I mean, like, if the idea is that, oh, we all share the same resources on this planet, then there should be a more unified use of it. It shouldn't be the idea that, like, I mean, the idea of capitalism is go somewhere else, get the job done cheaper, and then make me a profit, you know? And that, like, type of, like, the idea, even new car companies are coming out with new cars still every single year, you know? And it's just like, how much energy and stuff it goes into that, you know? And it's just like, how is this even, like, it's like, oh yeah, but we're making electric cars now. It's like, yeah, but you're still making cars, you know? Like, it's like, and I don't know if that's something that as a whole will ever do unless there was some like overarching dictatorship of like control, because I mean, like, look at the idea of even just unifying on taking a vaccine together. We can't do that, you know, like, we're not going to do that, you know, but I still have hope, you know, and we'll see what these next generation of people do. You know, I mean, they grew up in the worst of it probably, and I don't know if they're blaming us or they're blaming our parents, or it's been just this catastrophic. I mean, it's ignoring what's happening around you and not doing anything about it, but also just like kind of relishing in it, like you're gaining on it in some way, and that's the whole thing. I think it's just like it became too much. The U.S. also, like, you know, like when we were getting fatter, we were happy, you know, like, and now it's just like, okay, well, now we can't, you know, we can't move forward at this point without losing some of this problems that we created. I think,
like you said, the next generations, they have reason to blame us and the previous generations, and, you know, blame whoever you want. That's fine. Yeah, but work on fixing things. You know what I mean?
Work less on complaining, work more on fixing the actual problem.
The thing is, like, a lot of people don't believe in the human, like, project, like human beings in general. Like, a lot of people look at us like we're a parasite on Earth. Like,
a bacteria.
Remember when the pandemic happened, it was like, we're the real virus or whatever. It's like, no, hold on. Like, we do a lot of cool shit. We are good. Like, we try to make our surroundings better. Most of us, as much as we can. We mess up, for sure, and that's bad. But we generally want to do things, you know, good. We want to be nice to each other.
That's true.
So that is what worries me more than anything else. That, like, so many young people have this attitude of, like, we are the problem.
Okay, fair enough.
And that scares me. Like, you know, a lot of people are talking about, like,
what's the point if you don't exist, though?
Exactly.
We're the problem, but we're also the solution.
You shouldn't be making any kids. Like, that's the best thing you can do for the environment. Don't make any kids.
Yeah, they do say that. And that's probably true.
But what is that going to lead to?
What is that?
What does that even mean? Like, should we just kill all the humans then? Like, that's the natural end goal of that kind of mindset.
It is.
Like,
it is.
The world is better off without us, and I don't think it is.
Waiting for the bleach, you know. This is I mean, and I mean that in like a cleansing, because bacteria is it does operate, you know, in a similar attitude of the way, you know, like, it thinks it's amazing. Like, I've seen stuff under the microscope of where, like, the first day you'll see this little like wiggling microbe, and, like, I'm like, wow, this guy's like much more active than this. I mean, it shouldn't be there though. Okay. It shouldn't be there, and because it's like the environment is very, you know, set up for the stem cells, and the first day it's like making all these little windy things, and the next day you look and it's created this whole like lattice of like this, you know, this giant city now of there, and there's tons of them moving around, and you're like, oh my god, this is amazing, you know. And then on day 3, everything's dead. like not only them, but like the whole. They used up all the resources, and they killed everything. And it's just like, okay, well, they didn't have the better sense to do this. And whether or not we have evolved to have that better sense, now we definitely have the power to destroy ourselves. Like, that's clear. Sure. That's blatantly clear. And if we keep toxifying our environment, we're probably going to do that, or we're going to change ourselves in order to adapt to this, you know. Like, that's, you know, my father also said one thing about, like, he's like, you're never going to convince all the people to like stop eating all this like sugar and stuff. Like, he's like, what you should try to do is just make it so it's easier make it so biologically they can without getting sick. And I'm like, that seems terrible. Damn. You know, it's like, he's like, because you're not going to change, like, it's like that is the, you know, I mean, it's like, And it's like, well, am I going to go close every bakery, like every goodies store? It's like there's huge markets. It's like a huge machine, and that's the thing is like we've created these industries that are feeding us all these things that we're addicted to. And instead of changing the environment, he's like, just change the individual so that they don't.
This is how a AI horror movie starts, like dystopian.
That's an interesting concept, but like,
what do they say? The road to hell is paved with good intentions.
Exactly. No, and that is like, I mean, but theoretically, unless you're investing in these sciences right now, also, like, if in 20 years we can't breathe the atmosphere, or we can't go outside without having like, 3,000 sunblock, on. Instead, we have to have like some certain type of pigment in our skin. Things like this could be genetically modified, and that's kind of where like I think they've also thought of this for like if they send people to like Mars or different different like different planets, is like, okay, well, in a low gravity environment, like your body really takes a toll. Like it really is harmful to the body. How could you make it less harmful to the body? Could you put these genes into people who are then going to be the ones who go on these trips?
Right.
And that's something that may or may not be explored in the future, but it's probably something that's at least been spoken about at DARPA and NASA.
For sure. One of the scariest things in this field that I've heard of is ethnically selective biological weapons. Oh, okay.
Yeah, that's, I mean, you could do it even more specific than that. I mean, that is one thing, but also what about just okay. We would want individualized bioweapons. Like, so if you could
we would want individualized.
If you could just make it for one guy, it's like, we're going to put this.
Yeah, that's interesting.
And that might be possible someday. But also this idea of, of a specific ethnicity.
Yeah.
You probably have a lot of off-target people dying from it, because I know, now I did the 23andMe. I'm like a real mutt. Like it's just like there's, I think, India, and like there's only like one continent that I like my genetic background is not from. Like I'm even like 4% Nigerian and some other stuff. Like so it's like all across the board. So like whatever genes there are, I mean, whichever one you chose as being the one. Oh, if you have this, down no matter if what. You have this active, like you're gonna die. It's like there's gonna be a lot of off-target effects.
It's just crazy that people are doing these things. They're studying these things. And it's like just like we're talking about with the COVID virus. I mean, one of these things can just leak. Yeah. Suddenly, like everyone of this ethnicity.
Yeah, don't study that.
It's like, Jesus, what are we doing? Like, can we study something more reasonable than that? Jeez.
Let's study how to make unicorns. Like that. Not how to kill all the Muslims. Or the Arabs.
Man. Crazy. Yeah. People are doing weird stuff. We're doing a lot of beautiful stuff too, though.
That's true. That's true.
All
the diseases.
I feel like I'm like killing my own point here. I'm like, human beings are great, and then I'm like, we're also doing ethnically selective bioweapons.
No, but I mean, that's the thing is where
we're complex.
I mean, eugenics, even at like Cold Spring Harbor back in East Coast, was still like being taught as a like in the 70s, 80s, like even up until the 80s. I was like, whoa, okay, it's quite recent. And then you find out that like Native Americans were being sterilized up until like something like these same, like the 70s, I think, 60s, 70s, something like that. You have to fact check on that. But like there's really, I mean, like we've gotten over some big hurdles to where we are. That's why I like Hans Rosling. I was like, factfulness. It's like, look at the bright side. I mean, like compared, and that's what I think he does make the point in that book is like, before you didn't know about all the shit happening in the world because you didn't have, but it was still like, it was maybe even some of the stuff way worse. It's like, oh yeah. Like my dad, he was remembering, he was like, oh yeah, when they used to spray DDT, the kids used to go out and like literally like bathe in, like it's just spraying DDT. It's like, yeah, no wonder you got cancer at this ages, like Jesus. But
no, for sure. Like the whole history of colonialism and slavery. I mean, we just went to other countries and did whatever we wanted. No internet. No one's going to spread that on TikTok. So,
exactly. So now we just know about the stuff and a lot of the stuff. And the stuff that's depressing and scary and sad is the most attractive and like soundbitey for the media to propagate and propagate and propagate. And now, like, you know, you're just living in a world where you're like constantly like, oh, you know, scared, I think. Or a lot of people are.
They're trying to keep us scared.
Yeah.
But I think
Swedes are less scared, I'd say. I'd say Scandinavians in
Yeah.
general, they have a lot more like perspective of like, hey, don't believe everything you read also.
Yeah, for sure. But also, like, we're not as propagandized as the US is.
Yeah.
I think we're kind of moving in that direction, unfortunately, but we're still far from where the US is, and hopefully we're gonna learn from your mistakes over there.
From mistakes, yes. I am your scapegoat for the US. Just blame all your problems on me.
No, you escaped that propaganda.
Yeah, and at least for another, like, you know, baby's 3 years old right now, so at least another 15 years here. So
how is life in Sweden different from life in the US?
Oh, I mean, especially with a child, it's like day and night. I would be pulling out my hair stressed and also going into massive debt probably having a child in the United States. And here, you know, I mean, I got tons of days off. You know, I think our medical bill was like a couple $100, you know, it was very, very low. Like, it was amazing. And actually, my son, he was delivered at the same, in Dunderid, which is the same hospital that like the princess had her child. So I'm like, it's good enough for the princess. You know, I'm sure she got like her whole wing or something, but like we got our own, you know, whole room and everything by ourselves. You know, you don't pay. It was right as Corona started also. Right. So we got locked in actually during that time, and we're not allowed to leave like during the whole pregnancy. Oh, and actually she was in.
But you were allowed to be there with.
Yeah. I mean, it was like she was going into labor, and but then also like started to run a fever. She started running a fever when she was in labor, and they had to stop everything, like dilating, whatever, and give a corona test. Oh, no. Like it was just the law at the time was like, if anybody has a fever, you have to test for corona. It's you're in the middle of a procedure, you know, and it's just like
kind of busy with something else here.
Yeah, they're like, I don't know, like I guess we have to do it though. Like but it was an excellent experience for having a child, you know, like the social care for helping out with the kid. You know, he goes to preschool like 5 minutes away. So, I mean, I really cannot complain. Raising a kid is a lot easier here than it would be at home, despite the fact that I don't have like a family here. You know, right, I think that's the only downfall is like it's far from home, and you know it'd be nice to have like drop them off at grandma's once in a while.
Of course.
But no, but there's a lot of fun stuff. We got the swimming pool and all sorts of cool stuff here.
Nice.
Sundbyberg. Yeah.
A lot of people feel like it's hard to kind of connect with Swedes to establish like a new group of friends and stuff here. Yeah. Have you experienced that? Or
I have some really good friends. They're both Swedes. I mean, they're both kind of like they're both Swedes. They're like and yeah, I think we've been friends probably the longest. But in general, I think it was like they say you have like it's harder to connect with a Swede, but then once you're friends, like you have a friend for life, kind of. I think that's kind of the reality. There's good people everywhere, so I mean you meet good people, sure. And Swedes are chill, you know, like everybody speaks usually mostly people speak excellent English and stuff, so it's quite easy for me. And that's been nice, you know. Of course I worked over at the hospital and the institute there, so we have like tons of, you know, it's a lot of foreigners as well. Everybody or a lot of people like from all sorts of places coming there for the institute, so English is really the universal language there. So like, I don't know. It's but Swedes are cool for me. I like Swedes. Nice. I think they're chill. I think I like Norwegians also. You know, they seem like the some of the Norwegians I'd met were like the most like pro-America people I'd ever met. So I was like, wow, like, for sure. Jean jacket with a big American flag on the back. I'm like, dude, okay, you're like more pro-patriotic than I am, but
NATO buddies.
Yeah. Oh, that's probably why. Yeah, I didn't think about that. No. Yeah, it's
got great deals on gas and oil.
That's why.
Yeah, I heard they're great explorers of
Oh, really?
Russian what do you call gas pipes?
Oh, really? You just tap in.
There's a decent a decently solid theory that it was the Norwegians and the Americans who blasted the Nord Stream pipeline.
Jeez, okay.
Seymour Hersh wrote about it.
Really? Okay.
Yeah. We're kind of not supposed to talk about that.
No, fair enough.
Because we're all friends. We're all friends on this side of what's going on.
Yeah, that's good. That's good. But yeah, that's Scandinavia is a nice place to live, and whether or not it's cold during the winters, I think people also warm up during like the summertime as well.
For sure,
it's so you get this kind of. But that's why I think the ideal would be to leave during the winter. Honestly, that's kind of my. If the writing really can be pushed to the next level, I think that's where my goal is. Yeah.
So tell me about your writing.
So yeah, I'm writing a book. It's about 100 pages done right now, but like solid. And it's probably about a third way done. But it's called Variant Rising, and variant as being like a genetic variant. But it takes place in a future, kind of like the future of that we've been kind of discussing of like if things just continue to be worse and worse, where government is kind of dissolved, and like the US, instead of states, it's kind of dissolved into city-states run by people who basically kind of rule through their influencing, and that's kind of not a big important part of the story, just more of the kind of landscape of where this is coming from. But this is where there's been no ethical oversight for the type of genetic experiments that could be done, and what this kind of not biomedical, but bioweaponry of generating. It takes place first in deep underground in a facility that's doing these experiments where they use the basically body of a cow that's bred without legs or head to basically incubate different organisms that they're producing as militarized creatures, essentially. And they're also hardwired with something that's similar to like what Tesla's Neuralink type thing, right. Except for not in the sense of like Neuralink is actually quite unsophisticated in a lot of ways, but this would be something that's actually reading the brain, and I go through some of the science of how this kind of stuff could exist already now. Of course, some of it's like purely science fiction, but the idea is that all of these things have something has gone haywire. AI has kind of taken over the brains and it's kind of created its own life form living through these other organisms, and they kind of decide to cleanse what we call the farm, which is this place where they've been developing these mutant creatures underground. And it's fun to write this. It's like like for me, I've been writing like little short stories for many years, but I've always wanted to kind of jump into something like real, like a bigger effort, something that has real character development and stuff. Mm-hmm. And so like people are asking, who's this character? And I'm like, yeah, they're all basically me, but just like different parts. like there's just like different parts. And two of the main characters, they die in the very beginning, but they actually exist in this like AI world, this kind of metaverse, not metaverse, but more of a like an alternate universe, but completely in a cyber world. Yes. So there's a lot of I'll say, I'll give you a copy when it's finally done, man.
For sure.
But it's something that's been fun, and it's more of a passion than anything else. And now like starting to get through. I mean, I just started reading it for several friends and family, and they're like, dude, you have to like, this is like, what happens next? Like, really? I'm like,
that's
okay.
Awesome.
I'm like, okay, this is, I don't like to pat my own back here, but I'm like, all right, this is not too bad. I have even some family who's just like these kids, they're always on their phones and everything. And this actually, like, they were like, interested what's happening next. I'm like, oh my god, we got you away from the screen.
Nice.
So
that's an achievement for sure.
Yeah, they're like, what happens to this guy? I'm like, okay, this is and there's all sorts of weird stuff going on. There's like
super cool.
Yeah, and I get into other weird things like parabiosis, this idea that we have there's this kind of leader, and she's a queen, but I mean it's queen in a sense, but she uses she has these fetuses that are clones of herself that she uses parabiosis. And this is actually a technique that has existed for many, many years, where you take the circulatory system of an older or of a younger animal and connect it with an older animal, and the older animal actually gets younger. You know, I mean, it's like it's like basically vampirism in a sense. But you're not drinking the blood, you're basically circulating it through you. And there's actually a couple California startups that have been based off of this technology. Although they're not doing it with like obviously fetuses, they're doing it with like teenagers who have donated blood. But there's also no guarantee that those teenagers aren't eating McDonald's every single day and then going and donating that blood. But
there are people who are like Hollywood stars that people are talking about that have done this.
Oh, I'm sure.
With fetuses also.
With fetuses.
It's like I have no idea how valid this is, but I've heard people talking about that.
I mean, I believe it. See, in the name of vanity, and that's actually who this character is. She's just uber vain and uber after like throw anything at it to try to get me, you know. Eternal, you know. So it's
that is so interesting.
Yeah. So I mean, I'm happy about how it's progressing, and I was actually just writing before coming down here. Cool. Like things are getting crazy, so but it's stimulating, you know. It's fun and
so much fun.
And I don't know, my only like research now, I mean, because a lot of the science is so hardwired in me. Like I love to talk about it. I love to explain it in a more understandable way, you know. And that's where actually like, so I mean, my goal is to definitely, you know, like finish this book, obviously. But but the other real passion when it comes to science in general is there's a big prospect of curing monogenic diseases. And there's, I mean, based off the WHO, there's over, I think, 30,000 different monogenic diseases. And monogenic just means that there's one misspelling in your DNA that makes things catastrophic. Right. You know, you're born with like no arms, no legs. You know, like these are some of the people who have these like just really bad defects at early, you know, during development or during later stages, and they're heritable, meaning that if you have children, you're going to pass that down to them, and they're going to have the same problem. You know, some of these examples of this would be like Huntington's disease, where you have actually this. Or Fragile X syndrome. You have this like elongation that the more generations it goes, it just gets longer and longer and longer. And what that does is it basically creates huge problems with, I mean, it's a death sentence for you, you know? Right. And with gene editing technology, like we do have the potential already right now. We have the techniques and whatnot to go in and fix some of these things. And there's big publications on showing exactly how to do that. Now, there's been big oversight on regulating this, because this is obviously opening a big, you know, Pandora's box of like, okay, if we start mutating this, like what's going to happen? And there's been a real good, you know, proper consensus of like, okay, there's stuff, we're not going to use this technology for improvement. We're not making superheroes. Like nobody's getting like, I mean, you could put certain genes that would make you super stronger probably later on, like, you know, have much higher muscular density and stuff like that. So we know, and we understand pathways that could do that, but this technology should not be used for that. You know, and this is what like committees, I think it was a committee of ethicists, scientists, business people, like there's a whole like gambit of people who like went in there. And then there's like the kind of preventative stuff, BRCA1, BRCA2, you know, these breast cancer ones, the one that, what's her face? Tomb Raider. I can't remember her name. Angelina Jolie. She, you know, she had both breasts removed preventatively for BRCA1 because she was a carrier of BRCA1, BRCA2 apparently. And these are two genes that we know cause breast cancer. So if you have variants in them, your likely is very high to get them. This would be like kind of the yellow zone, you know, like of whether or not to use this. And they're saying like, no, still not that, you know, it's like, and the green of where like this, there's a consensus of, yes, we should use this technology as soon as it's safe, is if it's a life debilitating like disorder, like the ones I'm describing, monogenic diseases that are just really deleterious to the way of life. That's expensive for the society because, you know, you're paying for this. It's horrible for the family because, you know, they're taking care of this person their entire life, you know, it's a real, you know, usually it's not a cost I mean, if you want to be like completely take heart out of it, not only are these people suffering, but it's very expensive.
Yeah.
And so the idea is like, how can we get to this place? And the way we can get to this place is, well, we need to understand what we're putting in the embryo and whether or not it's creating more mutations or less mutations. Because the big issue, the big question mark of using CRISPR-Cas in any like mammalian system is whether or not you can make the proper edit without messing up a bunch of other stuff. Right. Because there's a lot of what we call off-target effects. And those off-target effects could be more damaging to the genome, to the whole continuity of the organism than the thing that you fixed.
Yeah.
So you want to go in, you want to make the fix, and you want it to be, and then you want it to disappear. And theoretically, there's actually ways of doing this now using even mRNA, having a very small pulse of this. It makes the protein can do, as long as you can make enough protein that you can titrate exactly, you can get the kinetics of how this protein is going to make that splice, going to make that edit, and then basically digest or dissolve into the system eventually. And like, so how long will it until it naturally degrades? And so there's but a lot of this timetable of like, well, how much and how, and that's where it becomes really scary, is because, like I said, with all of these things, like you expose it to a little bit too much, now you're doing something very damaging. Yeah. You do it too little, then you're not, it's the Goldilocks effect here that's necessary. But there's been really no way of studying that for when we're talking about a system that's just a very few cells. This is a blastocyst. So this is like about 7 days after, sperm meets egg, you have several cell divisions, and you have about 150 to 200 cells at day 7. And day 7 is right before it's going to actually implant into the uterus. And so like the idea is that, well, when it's still at like maybe the 4-cell stage, you go in, you inject one of these cells, or you inject multiple of these cells, or even at the 1-cell stage, you inject there. And you study where the off-target effects are. But the problem is even working with a human embryo, like we were the first lab, like I said, to work with healthy human embryos that were donated from the fertility clinic there. And these were people who had their children. They no longer wanted to have any more children. And so they decided to donate those like healthy embryos for the purpose of research. Otherwise, they were going to go down the drain. And so, or be destroyed, essentially.
Yeah.
And so like the thing is that every embryo that those people have is also a sibling of each other. So they're not genetically identical. And that's what makes it almost nearly impossible to study. Right. Oh, how much is the CRISPR changing it? Well, it's because you didn't even know what the thing was supposed to be in the first place. So you're saying, oh yeah, it messed up this and this. It's like, yeah, but when you have two parents come together, you also make a bunch of mutations. Yeah. So now that's where the stem cell world and this like embryo world kind of are coming together. Is it turns out that there's a Nicholas Riveron, I think he's one of the biggest pioneers in this. He's created these things called blastoids. And it's basically taking stem cells and pulsing them with the right cocktail of nutrients and whatnot to basically allow them to behave in the same way as a blastocyst. And they actually form the cavity.
What's a blastocyst?
The blastocyst is this like 150 to 200 cell sphere, the thing that actually implants in the uterus that becomes the conception, that becomes the organism itself.
But what does that mean, behaving the same way? They're not going to be genetically identical.
So they will be. So that's the thing, is like, since these are from a stem cell, the stem cell is genetically identical. That's the thing. That's you can take it even from your own cell, and then it's whatever gene pool, whatever genetics it has, it's always going to be the same here. So now you can do this with blastoids. You can actually make something that's like an embryo. And that's where now you can actually use these technologies on editing. Say you have somebody say you have somebody who has Huntington's disease, just as an example. You take skin cells from them, reprogram them back into a stem cell. The stem cell still has that genetic code of the Huntington's, but you can create a pseudo embryo, a synthetic embryo actually is what we're calling them, once they kind of reach the stringency of being like having all the same properties.
Right.
And that's the thing, is like whether or not these are actually going to be able to implant one day is very questionable, because we're getting closer and closer and closer. And that's actually my last paper before graduating. It was on the two of the like cell lines. I mean, this was for mouse, but it was actually showing how much closer we're getting when it comes to these different types of stem cell based synthetic embryos.
Right.
How well they're recapitulating, the real embryo. And we're getting to a point now where it's almost indistinguishable.
So basically embryo clones.
So basically embryo clones of whatever stem cell line that you want. So theoretically, if you and this is why I say like this gets crazy, because like if you found one of Brad Pitt's hairs,
yeah,
and you reprogrammed and you were able to isolate keratinocytes from it, which is a normal cell type that you could grow in a dish, and that could be reprogrammed into a pluripotent stem cell line. And then that pluripotent stem cell then could be differentiated into one of these synthetic embryos, and that would be implanted, theoretically have Brad Pitt clone.
My God, you've given me so many things, so many new nightmares today. How does this not end up in like a clone army where we just take the perfect soldier and make millions of them?
And I think that's kind of where my story is a lot going, but it's not about it's like now we're using animals and stuff, because like humans are pretty puny, when it comes to that stuff. But
man, I need to read this book.
Yeah, it's one of these days, soon.
So you mentioned 100 pages. How far long is that? Are like halfway there, or how much?
I'm about 12. I want to say about a third of the way done. It's getting kind of grandiose, like things are escalating fast now, but maybe at the least like 200 pages. So nice. Like and it's not just like I want it to be more of a fun read. It's something fun to read, and like but it's also
sorry for laughing,
dark.
But
it's like also really dark, and like it's like, oh man, like, this is like
No, I love that stuff.
So
like that's my cup of tea for sure.
Yeah, cool.
Do you have like a publisher you're working with?
I have nothing. I am like I literally like I was just like, okay, I'm doing this now, and like picked up. I went and bought a little notebook, and I was like, okay, I'm just gonna start writing it.
That's
now.
awesome. We can talk about that after.
Okay,
afterwards.
Yeah, definitely. I could definitely use, and I think also like smaller population like Sweden. If it's anything succeeds here, then it's always like boom. Over back in the States. So it's so definitely, man. Like yeah.
That's awesome. So I wanna know. I've started writing a book twice.
Okay.
Never finished either of them.
Yeah.
My problem is like working on a project that's that big.
Yeah.
I want to do so many different things. Yeah. So I can be like completely dedicated to writing this book, and then a week later I figure out an article I want to write or some other project I want to do, and then I'm all in on that. Yeah. How do you deal with that? How do you like get that amount of focus for that amount of time?
This one, I think it's honestly, it's probably the ADD hyper focus, because it'll just be for hours and like it flows out of me. It's
You're
like
saying I should try Adderall?
No, I don't take any medication. Well, not any, that kind of medication.
If you have ADD, you have it natural. You don't need Adderall.
No, I definitely like Adderall. Really, like I was prescribed Adderall or Dexedrol, actually Adderall and Dexedrol, I think, as like a teenager, and it was like literally one page. Do you have a hard time concentrating in class? It's like, who doesn't, And it's like, a lot of this is the byproduct of like, okay, you got a boring guy up there telling me about some history of something I really don't care about. There's no visuals. And then you go home and there's like video games with like colors coming out the wazoo. It's just like, how do you expect a human brain to... And then that was the idea.
We're not at all profiting from this.
Amphetamines to basically like hype, so
we're
that
just doing this because we care about you. We're not trying to profit off of this. Don't worry about that.
It was horrible. But that's the thing, is like they were, I loved Adderall for like a while of like just like I felt really capable and really and I think they've shown that now it doesn't really improve your performance, it just improves the way you perceive your performance, kind of. And but like I remember my buddy picking me up in the morning for school, and he's like, oh, it's another day. It was like a Monday, and he's like driving like, And I'm like, hey man, like what's going on? I was like, and he's like, yeah, what's up? And I was like, birds are chirping, like things are good, you know, like sun is out, you know. And he's like, yeah, that's because you're crack pills, you know. I was like, yep. And that was the thing also in the States is like you had endless prescription, like it was just like you go renew, and so you're always like every person who had a prescription was also a distributor. So I was like, oh, things are bad here, take a few, you know, like go for it, you know. Yeah. And so this was like the thing. But once that started happening, you know, like after, I mean, like several months, then you start noticing like you're clenching your jaw. I mean, like there's obvious like negative effects.
It's amphetamine.
Yeah, it's amphetamine. And
it's
like
pretty hard stuff.
And I eventually started to get like migraine headaches like regularly from it. I couldn't like even this there's like a feeling that I get from like even like a minutest amount. Like I think a couple of years ago my buddy was like, oh, you want an Adderall? I was like, yeah, why not, you know, just for fun. And I was like, I did not like it. Like I was like, oh, this is just bringing back like nightmares of just like not being able to sleep, not being able to like slow down, you know. It just put me overdrive, you know.
Was it hard to get off of?
Not in the end. Like, I mean, it was just probably like a real downer for like a week or something like that. But it was at a point where like, I remember like I had to like put something over the VHS little blinking light. Cause I was like, I had such a bad migraine that I was like, even the blinking light was like making me like, it was just horrible. Like it was just a really bad negative feeling. And now a lot of those drugs have been black labeled for giving you heart problems and stuff like that. So hopefully no permanent damage. But
so it's not Adderall then. What's your process? How do you focus
on
I
think I think it's just honestly like I'm enjoying what I'm writing right now. I think it's the hyper focus of doing something that I'm actually enjoying, because that's the only way. I mean, that's why I've succeeded, I think, in the jobs that I have. When I'm not in a job that I don't feel purpose, that I don't see like an output from what I'm doing, you know, I have a hard time pushing myself at all. But like but if I see how I'm like progressing, you know, then it's like it's really easy, and it's something that like I almost have like infinite energy. So I'll go like hours and hours of just like writing on end, and then maybe I don't have that like every single day, but otherwise I don't know, just a cup of coffee, you know, like I try to keep a real clean house. Like that's my way of how do you say, like procrastinating. Like I procrastinate in a very healthy way. It's by cleaning, because like I'm like I can't think when like things are filthy, you know, and like
clean house, clean mind.
Yeah, clean. It really does work for me. Like it really helps, and I don't know, that's helpful. Then I mean, sometimes I just feel inspired. Like I feel like I woke up a couple days ago. I was just like, oh, I want this to happen now in the book, you know, and like I just went and started writing for a good hour, you know, and just and you know, it's some of the stuff just needs to be like, it's garbage, and I just like, okay, delete it like after I write it, or like delete it a couple days later. But yeah, so far I've got like accumulated almost like nearly 100 pages now, and of like real law, like a decent size, like a proper text. You know, some books I'm like, oh my god, there's like 3 lines on each page, you know. It's like no, but this is like, I don't know, I'm putting some ambition in it, and it's the perfect time, because like right now I'm like in between jobs at I'm consulting, I'm teaching a little bit now, and so like but there's no full-time position right now, and that's where I don't really want, like I want to finish this before that, but also like it's kind of whether I run out of money before, you know, it's just but the society has been very overwhelming. I've never been unemployed in my life before. Like I've been working since I was like probably 15, 14 years old, like, and just like job after job after job, like grocery stores, like smoothie shops, you know, Home Depot. I worked for several years, you know, and call centers, like Airborne Express call center, what used to be, or what's now DHL. Oh man, that is a rough job. No windows, and like and just call after call for like 8 to 10 hours at a time, like not fun. But yeah, this is now, like, I mean, I feel like that's where I was like, yeah, I'm going to invest in my mind, and hopefully have, enough going on upstairs that, like, worst comes to worst, then I always can get a job using my mind.
with your resume, I'm sure
it's
that's
doing
fine.
okay. It's doing okay. Yeah.
Do you have like a clear end goal for the book, for the story, or is it developing and you just see where it goes?
I think it's kind of like I have an idea, but I think it's more of like because my cousin was actually asking me this also. She was like, "Do you have an outline? Like, how are you doing this without an outline?" And I'm like, "Yeah, I just like kind of like I'm feeling like I'm right. Like I know what's happening. Like it's like it's going through me. Like I don't know. Stephen King has kind of like said some of this stuff about how he writes, of like as if it's not planned, it just kind of like flows from him, And like I've really felt that in this. Like it's something that's like I think it's just because it's so parallel with a lot of like some short stories that I've written, but also like the science that I'm talking about. It just like fits together, and then I can kind of describe some weird scientific thing, like in the sense of the scenario that's going on right now, and it's just, I don't know. It's fun. It's fun right now.
It's like entertainment for you too as well, to be writing and see where it goes.
That's where, it's very, it's because I'm like, okay, well, what is going to happen? Yeah. And I also kind of want to end it like open-ended so that like that
this is a trilogy at least.
Yeah, we have a trilogy. Got a trilogy. Yeah. But actually that's funny because I am reading Lord of the Rings right now to my son. Like, we got through the first 5 books, I think. We're on God Emperor of Dune. So we got through the first 5 books of Dune.
Dune. Dune. Yeah, I was thinking Lord of the Rings. There's 3 of them.
No, but Dune, and then now we're on to. We went through a little bit of Michael Crichton, and now we're on to, and I think Asimov's Foundation also, and then now we're on to Lord of the Rings. So
nice.
This is so I think, I mean, it's going well. Like that kid's vocabulary is going to be, at least
awesome.
if you do learn through osmosis at these stages, I think like then it's good. But that's the same thing my dad did. He was always reading me books like Michael Crichton, like Congo and Sphere and Jurassic Park. I remember him reading all these to me as a kid, and so that's hopefully what I like pass down to my kid is like
sure.
Reading every night. Gotta do it, and also it's super helpful for me, I think, because like I'm reading all these different authors, and it's just like I'm like, I could write this, Not Frank Herbert though. I mean, he's amazing, but but some of the stuff I'm like,
you gotta start somewhere, and if you have it in you, clearly,
and Tolkien, he's on another level, man.
Tolkien, his brain must have been something different for sure.
That I mean, it's a lot of description. It's just a lot of description. I'm like, Jesus, dude. Like,
I read Lord of the Rings probably like when I was somewhere around 10 years old.
Yeah, same here. Like I read it,
and I had a friend who was reading the trilogy, and like 100 pages before the end of the last book, he just stopped. He just didn't finish it. And I told him, like, well, what's wrong with you? You went through like 1,500 pages and you're not doing the last 100. He
doesn't want it to end.
And I was still reading it, and no, he just lost interest. And I was reading it, and same thing happened to me.
Oh no!
I was like 100 pages from the end, and then I was like on vacation somewhere, didn't bring the book, so I was reading something else, and it was interesting. And I never finished it. Oh, man. So I haven't read the full trilogy.
See, I thought it was going to be like, like these television shows that you love, and then the last episode, people like a lot of people like don't watch the last episode, so that it's because they're like, I don't want it to end.
I was just an idiot. No plan here.
No plan. Fair enough.
But I love them back then. But now I don't really read fantasy.
No.
I
think the last thing I'm reading now, just like by myself, is like The 100, which is a show
they
now.
Made a show of that.
And I'm like, I don't know. I was like, it's fun, but it's like it's very like teenage girlish. I mean, in the sense, it's all like it's like I mean, and I'm like digging it too. I'm like, oh, this is cute, but like
I'm more
there's
into,
a lot of love stories going on in it.
I'm more into the dystopia stuff, like what you're writing. I love Brave New World, 1984. These kind of books.
These are great. These are
masterpieces. So
if you do get a chance for one of them that's like weird, like Frank Herbert, other than Dune series, like he wrote a book called Hellstrom's Hive. It sounds Swedish, like, but that is probably one of the weirdest books I've ever read. And it's kind of like, actually, like, I was kind of thinking that this book that I'm writing now kind of would fit in as like almost even like a prequel to the society that he creates in that. But it's I mean, his is just, it's a really brilliant book, and just really weird, just really
Do
weird.
you read any nonfiction? Or are you mainly in fiction?
It's mostly fiction. I mean, the nonfiction stuff I read is more like the universe, the fabric of time, and stuff like this.
Right.
And but I mean, a lot of that stuff like kind of puts me to sleep too. You know, I'm just like I like horror. Like I think like I Stephen King can for sure like write a book I think faster than I can read a book. But like but I mean, in some of his new stuff I was just like. I mean, there's one just recently, and it's like about I got like a quarter of the way through, and it was just about like some of them get a little too dark. Well, it was just about like
he got sober.
Yeah. I mean, he did. But I mean, that's good too. I mean, a lot of the
good for him.
A lot of the stories around that actually, like I think they have a lot of like if you read the Shining 2, like there was a couple. I mean, a lot of the characters I think you see Stephen King as himself, and that was cool. But like Dr. Sleep, that was the name of that one. But yeah, there's a new one. It was just about like somebody who's doing these car murders, like just like running into crowds of people with cars and then disappearing. I'm like, okay, man, like this is like watching the news. It's just like I'm like really kind of getting like, okay, I get it, but like.
Yeah, I don't need to read a full book for that.
There's no supernatural stuff, but really a cool one, The Outsider. I think that was recent. I think it's called The Outsider, but that was really cool. Like they made a series out of it recently as well, and the series did like an excellent job of like kind of like making the story. That's the thing is I think now visual effects are so good. Mm-hmm. Like the CGI and everything is so amazing that you can actually do the book's credit. Mm-hmm. And I think that's where also like the new Dune movies, you know, I mean, this was like almost like scene to scene, the exact book, you know, of course they got through like the first quarter of the first book, you know, but like, so it's going to be a long series. I mean, these people are going to get old, but like, but
they're going to be making a lot of money.
All of these movies now, I mean, they're so, you know, before you just had no possible way of like some of the grandiose stuff that's going on in the book. There's just no way of doing this, you know, and now you actually can. And I think they're staying more true to like the story, which is quite nice. You know, I think that's kind of cool. Like
for sure. Technology is crazy. We live in such a cool time.
We do, but also what is this quote? Like we're like archaic minds with like medieval institutions and godlike technology, something like this. Like it's a scary world, you know.
It's interesting because we're living in a time where we can actually see ourselves either going back to the Stone Age pretty soon or actually becoming godlike pretty soon. And, you know, the choices we make obviously are going to affect that.
I don't know if I want to become godlike though. I feel like that's I feel like there's already, you know. So my dad had like an interesting like perspective on life. He was always like, and that's why like in his passing I'm not really like, you know, emotionally pushed as like, this is a negative thing. He's always been like, you know, death is the sweet release from this, you know. And it's like, okay, that's a little morbid kind of an idea, but like nobody gets out alive, and like the idea of living for, you know, like humans, like I mean we've evolved to survive. We didn't evolve to even thrive, you know. So life is effort, you know. Life is a lot of effort, and now survival is equivalent to like, oh, you have to be all these things in order to survive in the world it is today. And a lot of those things are almost inhumane in the way that we're forcing ourselves to kind of fit in a box as a creature that maybe should have been, you know, should be outside more than in front of screens all the time, you know. Like I saw some really depressing statistics about like over a third of our life is going to be like for people who are 18, like a third of your life will be sleep and a third of your life will be in front of a screen or some ridiculous like high proportion.
I saw something crazy. Let me think. I think the average 8-year-old today has received more information than the average person in their entire life.
Exactly.
For 100 years ago, like as in like
bits of information. Exactly.
The average, I think it was 8-year-olds. Like,
so has the processing?
What does that do?
Has
to
the
us?
Biological processing tools like kept up? Has the hardware kept up with the software? You know, it's like probably not. That's why we're like death scrolling constantly. I hate that I can do that too. Like I'm like, oh, I'll just watch the one, and then it's like,
They got
and
you.
I'm like, oh shit, like where did the last hour go? You know, and it's just like, but this one's interesting. You know? and they really are. Some of them are interesting, but a lot of the stuff they say, like, your brain can't even process the information in that amount of speed. So like you're watching it, but like 2 seconds later, you're not going to even remember.
No, you're looking for a next hit.
Yeah, it's just it's a little dopamine hit, little gush of dopamine or serotonin.
One of the most addictive pattern is positive reinforcement randomly distributed.
Yeah.
That's the most addictive pattern, like slot machines.
Oh yeah.
You know, every now and then you win. You get the positive reinforcement, but it's random. It's not every third time. It's not every fifth time. It's now and then.
Yeah.
That's the most, because when we were like in the savannah, we would walk around looking for food, and we find like a bush of berries, and it's like, oh my God, eat it, happy, you know, and then you go, because that's survival.
Yeah, exactly.
So all these apps, they hijack that system, and you feel like
it's exploited.
This is a great video, and then you keep scrolling because you want the next one, but it's not coming right away. It's maybe in 2, 3, 4, 5 videos.
It's like, hit or miss.
Oh, here's a good one. And
Ninja Cats. Okay, I'll watch Ninja Cats. Yeah, I do like.
Yeah, that stuff is. I have a zero tolerance policy for scrolling.
Okay, good.
I use like Instagram and these apps mainly to like get the word out for the podcast or invite people, but. No, like I'm not allowed to scroll once in like the reels. That's
impressive. That's impressive, man.
I had to because it was.
Like I mean, it'll just eat through your time, but like I mean, and it's just so depressing because you look around and like it's everybody. It's not even just the young people. It's like
old people are the worst.
Old people are the worst. Like my uncle is at home and he's just on the tablet like for hours and hours and hours, just on YouTube videos, and I'm like. You know, and then like the little kid comes over and he's like, "Oh, here's my phone." You know, he gives the phone. Thanks for giving my kid crack.
My mom asked me about TikTok. I'm like, no. I've seen you with Netflix. No.
Yeah, Netflix is already like. I mean, this continuation. If it doesn't say like, should I start the next one? Yeah. Now it just goes, and you can just you can lose a day. You know,
for sure. It's crazy.
But it's also the beauty of the technological.
It is. I think we will figure things out. Yeah. I think we will look at this era. I mean, the internet came like 30 years ago.
That's true.
It's still
true.
So,
and we were yelling at people
young.
like, "Oh, these people were with their books. Yeah. You know, what are they doing with their heads and books?"
We're gonna reach a stage where we're gonna look back at this era and be like, "Holy shit, they gave TikTok to kids? What are they doing?"
Oh yeah. No,
and we're gonna figure it out, but it's gonna take a little while.
The opium coming over. That's what I've heard. They're like, "Oh yeah, China's
sure.
they regulate their stuff."
It's a fantastic weapon. Why wouldn't they use it as such? I mean, clearly it's going to be used as such.
Getting dumber, you know, like, oh man. But no, that's it's an interesting. I mean, I say this, I'm like, technology. But then yesterday, I think I was on this new Oculus Meta, like what is this? The new VR, MetaQuest. There we go. The MetaQuest 3, the new one where it actually has. So you see the real world.
It's like augmented reality.
Right. And I was thinking about this like a lot of like how this can be used in the future of like your own like neighborhood, you know, and how also people could advertise, you know, like would be that's going to be the other thing is like
straight into your brain.
Yeah, it'll just be on the. But then you could also have like different worlds, you know. You're like, oh, I don't like, you know, this one's made by so and so, and he has these advertisements, you know, maybe tastefully done because of, you know, he's getting paid for that in that sense, or she's getting paid for this. But then like having these augmented worlds where you put on your goggles and then all of a sudden it looks like, you know, cyberpunk, you know, Tokyo or something like this, neons everywhere. And like advertisements jumping out at you, and as long as it doesn't influence like you not getting hit by a car, you know, like while you're walking by, it's going to be something, you know, it's going to be like there's going to be that pretty soon. Have you seen the Ray-Bans also?
I haven't, no.
So there's Ray-Bans that are having this augmented, really? like at least you can take pictures with it and like, but it'll have like, so I think it has some heads up display kind of. And so, I mean, that kind of stuff is right on, like right on the cusp of this. So I think it's going to be wild, but I'm like, oh yeah, well, I guess maybe we won't looking at screens, but we're just going to look at an augmented reality in the future, you know. And
soon we're in the Matrix.
Pretty much.
But, it's going to be super cool. But the one thing though, like when they figure out virtual sex, we're done.
Yeah, that's going to be an issue. I mean, I think that's already an enormous market probably for the virtual reality. I mean, I would assume.
Talk about profit incentives.
Yeah. I feel like that
you can make that happen with like whoever you want. You just pick. When that happens, we're done.
That's it. Yeah, that's a good point.
We need to figure out the clones that you were talking about before we figure out the virtual reality sex.
Yeah, because otherwise then it's going to be, what is this? What is the dystopian future comedy that happened a long time ago? It was like, it turned out to be a documentary rather than just a comedy. That's, I can't remember the name of it.
Yeah, I don't know which one you're talking about.
No, there's one where the Brooklyn Nine-Nine, one of the guys, he's the president.
Idiocracy?
Idiocracy, yes.
No,
but Idiocracy, Idiocracy, though. Like,
yeah.
You know, where it's just tons of screens, everybody barely speaks any language anymore, just this kind of like guttural,
and it's
and you're on a toilet.
It's the creator of Beavis and Butthead that made it. It's so funny to watch it now, and you're like,
it's not so much different.
We're kind of almost
and it was
there.
funny because apparently like one of the little like Easter eggs to that was the knowledge that like he had people wearing Crocs in that movie because of the fact that he thought these were like the ugliest things possible and nobody in their right mind, and now they're like super popular. Like people are putting all these little things on them now, like
little fancy Louis Vuitton Crocs and stuff. It's like such a weird time, man.
I mean, Crocs are popular. It's like we just live in bizarro land, and it just gets weirder and weirder. But,
for sure. But there's a lot of cool shit to be hopeful about, as we talked about. So, and one of them is your book. So,
thank you. Yeah,
we could talk for hours, obviously, but maybe we should start wrapping things up and do another conversation when your book is published.
Dude, absolutely. I will talk to you about perhaps getting some connections here.
Of course. I can help. In any way I can help. I'll gladly do so.
Thank you, Yoshi.
Listen, man, this has been a fantastic conversation.
Cool. Yeah.
Thank you for sharing all the cool shit you do and you've done. And
thank you for having me. It's been a pleasure, and definitely anytime. I honestly thought like, just having a little caffeine before, and like, I'll go with it.
That's the trick.
Let the ADD do the talking. It's like,
well, the ADD did great.
Excellent. Thank you, man. I appreciate it.
Thank you very much, and thank you to everyone listening, watching. See you next time.